Oh, a new visitor from the woods. Welcome. Are you a lost wanderer, tired from a long journey? Then join me, sit beside the fireplace, and let me tell you some stories that may soothe your mood as you regain your strength. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment where you're watching from and what time it is. You all set? Good. Let's start the story with one of the darkest and most mysterious forms of magic ever conceived in the wizarding world, Horcruxes. The flickering flames before us seem to dim slightly at the mere mention of the word, as if even the elements themselves recoil from such magic. A Horcrux, you see, represents the furthest reaches of magical corruption, a vessel containing a fragment of a witch or wizard's soul, torn apart through the ultimate act of evil, murder. The concept of the Horcrux dates back to the early Middle Ages, though its origins are shrouded in such secrecy that few texts dare mention them. The most infamous among these rare tomes was Secrets of the Darkest Art, once kept in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library until Albus Dumbledore removed it during his tenure as headmaster. Within its forbidden pages lay the gruesome instructions for creating such an abomination, a process so horrific that even the most hardened practitioners of the dark arts would hesitate before attempting it. Imagine, if you will, the soul as a complete entity, whole and untarnished. Now picture the violent act of murder, creating a tear in that wholeness, a spiritual wound. The dark wizard who seeks immortality through a Horcrux exploits this tear, performing complex and terrible magic to sever a portion of their soul completely, then sealing it within an object of their choosing. As long as that fragment remains safe, they cannot truly die. Even if their body is destroyed, a piece of them remains tethered to the mortal world. For centuries, this magic was considered theoretical by most, a cautionary tale rather than a practical pursuit. That is, until a brilliant but troubled student at Hogwarts named Tom Marvolo Riddle discovered these secrets during the 1940s. His fascination with immortality led him down increasingly darker paths, culminating in not just the creation of a single Horcrux, which would have been unprecedented enough, but eventually 7 of them, fragmenting his soul beyond anything attempted in magical history. The first Horcrux Riddle created was his own diary, imbued with the soul fragment resulting from the death of his fellow student, Myrtle Warren. This seemingly ordinary object contained a portion of Voldemort capable of independent thought and action, as the wizarding world would discover 50 years later when it possessed young Ginny Weasley and reopened the Chamber of Secrets. As Tom Riddle transformed into Lord Voldemort, he sought more significant vessels for his precious soul fragments. He favored objects of historical importance, particularly those connected to the founders of Hogwarts. Salazar Slytherin's locket, Helga Hufflepuff's cup, and Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem all became corrupted by his dark magic. These were not random choices. Voldemort saw himself as the greatest sorcerer ever to live, and by claiming these artifacts, he symbolically placed himself among wizarding history's most revered figures. The Gaunt family ring, carrying the Resurrection Stone, though Voldemort remained ignorant of its true significance as one of the Deathly Hallows, became another Horcrux, connecting him to his pure-blood ancestry through his mother's family. Later, in an act of twisted intimacy, his snake Nagini became a living Horcrux, perhaps the most dangerous of all, as it could think and move independently under his control. And there was one more, created unintentionally on that fateful night in Godric's Hollow, when Voldemort's killing curse rebounded from infant Harry Potter. A fragment of the already unstable soul attached itself to the only living thing it could find, Harry himself, creating an unprecedented connection between the boy and the Dark Lord who had murdered his parents. The hunt for these Horcruxes became the most crucial and dangerous mission in the Second Wizarding War. Albus Dumbledore began the quest alone, locating and destroying the Gaunt Ring at terrible personal cost. The curse it carried eventually claimed his life, though Severus Snape's intervention bought him precious time. The headmaster's blackened, withered hand served as a constant reminder of the lethal protections Voldemort placed around his soul fragments. After Dumbledore's death, the burden fell to Harry Potter, along with his loyal friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. Imagine these three young wizards, barely of age, tasked with finding and destroying the remaining Horcruxes while evading the full might of Voldemort's regime. They had no map to follow, scant information about what the objects might be, and only a mysterious bequest from Dumbledore, the Sword of Gryffindor, which, impregnated with basilisk venom, was one of the few substances capable of destroying a Horcrux. Their journey took them from the corrupted Ministry of Magic, where they reclaimed Slytherin's locket from Dolores Umbridge, to the depths of Gringotts Bank, breaking into Bellatrix Lestrange's vault to retrieve Hufflepuff's cup. They faced enchanted protective measures that ranged from multiplying treasures that burned, to the most powerful curses imaginable. The search for Ravenclaw's diadem led them back to Hogwarts itself, hidden within the Room of Requirement, a place that could become anything a seeker needed, and where Voldemort had concealed this precious relic years earlier during a brief visit to the school. Each Horcrux presented unique challenges for destruction. The locket fought back most vigorously, tormenting Ron with visions of his deepest fears and insecurities, before he finally overcame them to strike the fatal blow with the Sword of Gryffindor. The cup was destroyed in the Chamber of Secrets, using a basilisk fang harvested from the long-dead serpent. The diadem met its end in fiend fire, cursed flame of immense destructive power, conjured inadvertently by Vincent Crabbe during the Battle of Hogwarts. Nagini, the living Horcrux, was beheaded by Neville Longbottom with the Sword of Gryffindor in the final moments of the battle, while Voldemort's diary had been pierced years earlier by Harry using another basilisk fang. The most poignant destruction came when Harry himself walked willingly into the Forbidden Forest to meet Voldemort, understanding that he carried within him a fragment of the Dark Lord's soul that must be destroyed. His willing sacrifice to protect those he loved created powerful old magic, the same kind that had saved him as an infant. And when Voldemort cast the killing curse yet again, it destroyed only the Horcrux within Harry, leaving the young wizard himself with the chance to return. The consequences of creating Horcruxes extend beyond the practical achievement of a twisted form of immortality. With each split, Voldemort's soul became more unstable, his humanity more distant, his appearance less human. The handsome Tom Riddle gradually transformed into the snake-like, red-eyed figure that struck fear throughout the wizarding community. More significantly, he lost the ability to feel remorse, the only known way to reunite the soul fragments, a process said to be excruciatingly painful and potentially fatal. This is perhaps the most profound lesson of the Horcruxes. Immortality achieved through such corrupt means comes at the cost of one's very humanity. In seeking to conquer death, Voldemort instead condemned himself to a half-life devoid of love, connection, or understanding of the most powerful magic of all. As our fire burns lower and the shadows grow longer, consider this question: what price would be too high for immortality, and what parts of ourselves are we willing to sacrifice in pursuit of our deepest desires? The answers may reveal more about our nature than we care to admit, illuminating the darkness within that all must acknowledge to truly master themselves rather than fall prey to its seduction. Chapter 2. The Many Disguises of Alastor Moody. The shadows shift as we turn the pages of wizarding history to reveal a figure whose very existence became synonymous with vigilance and disguise. As the embers in our fireplace cast dancing patterns across the room, let us explore the remarkable life of Alastor Mad-Eye Moody, whose paranoid methods and masterful concealments served as both his signature and his salvation throughout a storied career. Long before Harry Potter encountered the grizzled Auror, Alastor Moody had carved a fearsome reputation in the wizarding world. Born into a family with a strong tradition of dark wizard catchers, young Alastor showed early promise in both defensive magic and the subtle arts of concealment. While at Hogwarts, his professors noted his exceptional ability to transfigure himself, changing small features to become nearly unrecognizable to classmates. a talent that would later define his professional methodology. Imagine a young Moody, his face still whole, both eyes still his own, practicing minor alterations to his appearance in the dormitory mirrors. Even then, he understood something fundamental about magical warfare. Survival often depends not on one's ability to fight, but on one's ability to avoid detection entirely. After graduating with top marks in defense against the dark arts and transfiguration, Moody joined the Aurora department at the Ministry of Magic during the rise of the first dark wizards, who would eventually rally under Voldemort's banner. The department valued his unconventional thinking and formidable magical prowess, quickly assigning him to cases involving the most dangerous dark wizards of the era. Moody's approach to disguise differed markedly from the standard ministry protocols. While many Aurors relied heavily on Polyjuice Potion for undercover work, Moody preferred a combination of subtle transfiguration and disillusionment charms. He would transform just enough of his appearance to become unremarkable, adjusting his height slightly, altering his facial structure, changing his hair color and texture, while retaining the ability to cast complex spells without the disorientation that sometimes accompanied complete physical transformation. His collection of invisibility cloaks became legendary within the department. Unlike many wizards who might own a single heirloom cloak, Moody acquired several of varying qualities and characteristics. Some were optimized for absolute silence, woven with silencing charms that muffled even breathing. Others were enhanced with thermal masking enchantments to prevent detection by magical devices sensitive to body heat. He rotated them methodically, never using the same one twice in succession, understanding that predictability meant vulnerability. The first war against Voldemort carved its marks permanently into Moody's flesh and spirit. During an undercover operation in northern Scotland, his disguise was compromised when a Death Eater recognized a distinctive spell-casting pattern. The ensuing battle cost Moody a significant portion of his nose, rather than having it magically regrown, which would have restored his previous appearance and potentially compromised future disguises. He chose to leave the wound, incorporating his injuries into his evolving methodology of unpredictability. His most significant loss came during the capture of Igor Karkaroff. Disguised as a low-level magical smuggler, Moody had infiltrated Karkaroff's network over months. The operation was proceeding perfectly until an unexpected encounter with Evan Rosier. The vicious duel that followed resulted in Rosier's death but cost Moody his eye. This injury would have ended many Aurors' careers, but for Alastor it became an opportunity. The magical eye that replaced his natural one was commissioned from an anonymous enchanter rumored to have trained with both the Department of Mysteries and Goblin craftsmen. This remarkable magical artifact could see through solid objects, invisibility cloaks, and even the back of Moody's own head. More importantly for his disguise work, the eye could detect various forms of concealment magic, from disillusionment charms to Polyjuice Potion transformations. What seemed a devastating injury became perhaps his greatest asset. As the years passed, and his body accumulated more scars, each with its own story of dark encounters and narrow escapes, Moody developed an increasingly complex system of disguises. He maintained several fully realized alternate identities, complete with documentation, properties, and established histories in various wizarding communities. There was Edmund Crockford, a mild-mannered apothecary supplier in Yorkshire; Wendell Browning, a rather grumpy specialist in magical creature control who frequented the seedier establishments in Knockturn Alley; and perhaps most elaborate, Finbar O'Sullivan, an Irish importer of specialty magical ingredients who had business dealings throughout Europe. Each identity received meticulous attention to detail. Moody would practice different walking gaits, develop distinct speech patterns and vocal characteristics, and even cultivate different magical signatures, subtly altering the way he cast common spells to prevent recognition by those familiar with his true magical style. These weren't merely disguises, they were complete transformations of persona that allowed him to move undetected through various strata of wizarding society. His wooden leg, acquired after a particularly nasty encounter with Antonin Dolohov, presented unique challenges for his disguise work, rather than attempting to conceal it completely, which might create suspicion if discovered. Moody instead created several interchangeable prosthetics. Some were designed to mimic a natural limp, others enchanted to move with perfect fluidity, and one particular favorite was crafted to make absolutely no sound whatsoever, regardless of the surface it traversed. During the years of relative peace following Voldemort's first defeat, Moody continued to refine his methods. Some colleagues found his continued paranoia excessive, even comical at times, but Moody understood something they didn't. Dark wizards rarely announced their return. His constant vigilance and refusal to abandon his disguise protocols kept his skills sharp during years when most of the wizarding world relaxed into complacency. The greatest irony of Alastor Moody's career came when the very skills he had perfected were used against him. Before the start of Harry Potter's 4th year at Hogwarts, Moody was overpowered at his home by Barty Crouch Jr., who proceeded to impersonate the Auror, using Polyjuice Potion for nearly an entire school year. The impersonation was so masterful that it fooled even Albus Dumbledore, a testament both to Crouch's skill and to how few people truly knew the real Moody beyond his surface eccentricities. Crouch studied Moody's mannerisms meticulously during the months he kept him imprisoned. He adopted the gruff demeanor, the distinctive magical eye movements, the habit of taking swigs from a hip flask, and the legendary catchphrase, constant vigilance. What Crouch couldn't replicate, however, was the depth of knowledge and experience that informed Moody's paranoia, where the real Moody's caution stemmed from hard-won wisdom and calculated risk assessment. Crouch's portrayal leaned into theatrical madness. Perhaps the most revealing difference between the real Moody and his impostor appeared in their teaching methods. While Crouch's Moody demonstrated the unforgivable curses with barely contained glee, the real Alastor had always advocated for a more practical approach to defense. In his brief stint as a trainer for new auras before his retirement, Moody emphasized situational awareness and escape tactics over offensive magic. Being the most powerful duelist in a graveyard is cold comfort. He would often growl at trainees who focused too heavily on combat spells. After being rescued from his own magical trunk, where Crouch had kept him imprisoned for months, Moody's paranoia understandably intensified. He developed new protocols for verifying his identity to Order members, including a complex system of challenge questions with answers known only to him and specific individuals. He began carrying a specialized magical mirror that would reveal true appearances regardless of magical concealment, and he refused to maintain any disguise for longer than absolutely necessary. During his final mission with the Order of the Phoenix, the operation to move Harry Potter from Privet Drive, Moody's planning reflected his lifetime of disguise work. The use of 7 identical Harry Potters created precisely the kind of confusion that had saved Moody's life countless times before. Though he would not survive this final mission, falling to Voldemort himself during the flight from Privet Drive, his strategy ensured Harry's survival and demonstrated the core principle that defined his career: deception and disguise are often more powerful than direct confrontation. The legacy of Alastor Moody extends far beyond the dramatic eye and the weathered face that most remember. His techniques for magical disguise and counter-detection were incorporated into our training programs following the Second Wizarding War. The Moody protocols for establishing and maintaining cover identities became standard practice for magical law enforcement throughout Europe, and his collection of disguise-related magical artifacts was preserved by the Ministry as a resource for future generations of dark wizard catchers. As the firelight dims and we conclude our exploration of this remarkable wizard's many faces, consider this: behind the masks we wear and the appearances we present to the world, what essential truth of ourselves remains unchanged? And in a world where even the most vigilant can be deceived, how do we determine what and whom we can truly trust? Chapter 3. The Uses of the Disillusionment Charm. Invisibility has always fascinated wizard kind. As night deepens around us, and the boundaries between seen and unseen grow thin, let us explore one of the most elegant and practical concealment magics ever developed. The Disillusionment Charm, a spell that doesn't truly render one invisible, but rather allows the wizard to become a chameleon, blending seamlessly with their surroundings. The origins of the Disillusionment Charm reach back to medieval times, when wizarding communities lived in closer proximity to muggles and often needed to conceal magical activities. Historical records from the early 13th century mention a Spanish witch named Estella Oculta, who developed what she called the Vanishing Veil, a spell that would cause the target to take on the appearance of whatever lay behind them. Unlike true invisibility, which can create suspicious distortions or complete absences in the visual field, Oculta's innovation was subtler and often more effective. The spell was refined over centuries, with British wizards making particularly significant contributions during the witch hunt era of the 1600s. The incantation we know today was standardized by Flavius Belby in 1672, though the wand movement, that distinctive tapping on the head that triggers the spell, was added by Artemisia Lufkin, who would later become Minister for Magic during her work to systematize magical education. Imagine the sensation of the Disillusionment Charm as it takes effect, that curious feeling of something cold and wet trickling down from the crown of your head, where the wand tapped, spreading slowly across your entire body. Many who experience it describe the sensation as like an egg breaking, though the 19th century charm scholar Marcellus Wimple more poetically likened it to being gradually immersed in a pool of liquid mirror. As the enchantment flows downward, it transforms the appearance of everything it touches, rendering robes, skin, and even magical accessories like a seemingly perfect window to whatever lies beyond. The charm operates through a complex magical mechanism that continually samples the visual information from the environment around the witch or wizard and projects it onto their form. This process requires active magic, unlike an invisibility cloak, which maintains its properties without ongoing magical input. Consequently, the Disillusionment Charm requires not only precise spellcasting, but also a fair amount of magical energy to maintain, especially when the concealed person is moving through changing environments. The quality of a Disillusionment Charm varies dramatically with the skill of the caster. A novice might achieve only a mild blurring effect, making them appear somewhat like a distorted heat haze, noticeable to the careful observer, particularly when moving. An accomplished witch or wizard, however, can blend so perfectly with their surroundings that even other magical practitioners, looking directly at them, might perceive nothing more than a slight shimmer of movement, easily mistaken for a trick of the light. Albus Dumbledore was renowned for his mastery of the charm, capable of rendering himself so completely disillusioned that even those who knew he was present could not detect him without additional magical assistance. During the First Wizarding War, Dumbledore's skill with the charm allowed him to observe Death Eater gatherings directly, gathering crucial intelligence that saved countless lives. His perfectionism was such that he was known to practice in front of the enchanted mirrors at Hogwarts, which would provide honest assessments of his visual imperceptibility. The practical applications of the Disillusionment Charm extend far beyond mere concealment of persons. Throughout wizarding history, the charm has been adapted for a remarkable variety of purposes, many of which have become so integrated into daily magical life that we scarcely notice them anymore. Consider the Night Bus, that purple triple-decker magical transport that assists stranded witches and wizards. Its ability to navigate through Muggle traffic without detection relies on a specialized version of the Disillusionment Charm that activates automatically when Muggles approach. Rather than taking on the appearance of its surroundings, the bus temporarily projects an image of empty road to non-magical observers, allowing it to squeeze between obstacles that should be impossible to navigate. The Ministry of Magic employs specialist charm workers who maintain large-scale disillusionment enchantments on significant magical landmarks. Hogwarts Castle benefits from ancient variations of the charm that make it appear as a dangerous ruin to any Muggle who might wander too close. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries conceals its entrance behind what appears to be an abandoned department store. These persistent enchantments represent some of the most sophisticated magic in Britain, requiring annual renewal and adjustment. In the home, modified disillusionment charms protect wizarding communities from Muggle observation. The entire village of Hogsmeade employs weather-responsive enchantments that make distant observers perceive only undeveloped Scottish Highlands. Individual magical households often use localized versions on their properties, concealing everything from Quidditch hoops in the garden to the occasional dragon being illegally kept in a modified shed, though the Ministry strongly discourages the latter. During the Second Wizarding War, the Disillusionment charm became an essential survival tool for those fleeing persecution. Muggle-born wizards on the run from snatchers would often live under continuous disillusionment, casting the charm repeatedly throughout the day as its effectiveness waned. Members of the Order of the Phoenix became adept at casting the charm wordlessly and on multiple targets simultaneously, a considerable magical achievement that spoke to the dire circumstances they faced. The charm proved particularly valuable during the Seven Potters operation to move Harry Potter from Privet Drive. While the primary deception involved Polyjuice Potion to create multiple decoys, disillusionment charms concealed the Thorels and Broomsticks from Muggle observation during the flight. Kingsley Shacklebolt, whose skill with the charm nearly rivaled Dumbledore's, maintained the enchantment on his Thestral throughout an aerial battle, a testament to his magical prowess and concentration. Beyond its practical applications, the disillusionment charm has inspired philosophical debate within the wizarding community. Unlike true invisibility, which creates a complete separation between the observer and the observed, the charm creates a curious middle state, present yet unseen, participating in the world, while seemingly absent from it. This has led some magical theorists to explore the charm as a metaphor for the wizarding community's relationship with the larger Muggle world, present alongside it, affected by its movements, yet deliberately maintaining an illusion of absence. The ethics of the charm have also been questioned, particularly regarding its use in magical education. Hogwarts professors rarely teach the spell before an EWT level, concerned that younger students might abuse its potential for eavesdropping or rule-breaking. This cautious approach stands in contrast to Durmstrang Institute, which introduces the charm to students as young as 13, emphasizing its defensive applications and cultural importance in Eastern European wizarding traditions. Like many powerful magical tools, the disillusionment charm has been subject to restriction and regulation. The improper use of magic office monitors for unusual or extensive applications of the charm, particularly in Muggle-dense areas. Unauthorized use to observe restricted areas of the Ministry or other governmental facilities carries severe penalties, including a sentence in Azkaban for repeated offenses. These restrictions were dramatically tightened during Pius Thickness's administration, when even teaching the charm became regulated, a measure ostensibly for security, but primarily intended to prevent resistance fighters from concealing themselves. The counter-charm deserves mention as well. Known as the Revealing Spell or a Periseum, it creates a ripple of revealing magic that can temporarily disrupt the effects of the disillusionment charm, causing the concealed person or object to become briefly visible. Advanced magical detectors like sneakoscopes and secrecy sensors can also alert their users to disillusioned presences, though they typically cannot pinpoint the exact location without additional magic. Some magical creatures possess natural abilities that render the charm less effective. Cats, with their heightened magical sensitivity, often appear to track disillusioned wizards with uncanny accuracy. More dramatically, dragons can detect prey regardless of magical concealment, relying on acute thermal sensing rather than visual identification. This limitation became tragically apparent during a 1799 incident in the Hebrides when a team of disillusioned researchers underestimated a nesting Hebridean black's ability to locate them. As with many aspects of magic, the effectiveness of the disillusionment charm often reflects the wizard's internal state. Those who truly wish to remain unnoticed, who have cultivated a certain quietness of spirit and movement, typically achieve more complete concealment than those whose emotions run high or whose intentions involve disruption. This curious connection between magical effectiveness and mental discipline has led some to classify the charm as borderline mind magic, though most scholars reject this categorization. The most masterful practitioners develop a distinctive relationship with the spell over time, often describing a shift in their perception of themselves and their surroundings. Or Nymphadora Tonks once remarked that prolonged use of the charm created a curious double vision, seeing oneself as both present and absent simultaneously. This heightened awareness can become almost meditative, a practice of existing between states of being. As our exploration of this remarkable enchantment comes to a close, and the charm of evening settles more completely around us, consider this. In a world where appearances so often deceive regardless of magic, what parts of ourselves do we instinctively disillusion in daily life, and what would it mean to become truly visible, not just to others but to ourselves? Chapter 4. The Hauntings of the Shrieking Shack. The wind outside seems to howl a little louder now, reminiscent of the eerie sounds that once emanated from what is perhaps the most notorious structure in Wizarding Britain. On the outskirts of Hogsmeade village, standing alone on a small hill, looms a dilapidated building whose reputation for supernatural terror earned it the title of most haunted dwelling in Britain. Yet, like many things in the wizarding world, the truth behind the Shrieking Shack's fearsome reputation is both more mundane and more poignant than the legends suggest. The structure itself is deceptively ordinary in its origins. Built in the early 1800s, the building initially served as a modest country home for Hector Dagworth Granger, a noted potioneer seeking solitude for his experiments. After his death, the property changed hands several times before being purchased by the Hogwarts Board of Governors in 1971, a seemingly curious acquisition that would later reveal itself as part of Albus Dumbledore's compassionate planning. Architecturally, the Shrieking Shack epitomizes the rural wizarding style of the early 19th century. Its timber-framed construction features the distinctive curved beams that once indicated a dwelling designed to accommodate magical expansion charms. The steep pitched roof, now partially collapsed, originally bore enchantments to repel weather damage, spells that have long since faded, leaving the structure vulnerable to Scotland's harsh elements. The interior tells a different story than its humble exterior might suggest. While appearing to be an ordinary, if neglected, country dwelling from outside, the rooms within contain subtle but significant modifications. The windows, though boarded from the exterior, are reinforced with unbreakable charms from within. The floorboards are anchored with permanent sticking charms to prevent them from being torn up. Most notably, the doors between rooms feature unusually robust frames and multiple locking mechanisms designed not to keep intruders out, but to keep something in. To understand these adaptations, we must turn to the true purpose of the Shrieking Shack during its most active period. In 1971, Albus Dumbledore faced a unique challenge. A talented young wizard named Remus Lupin had been accepted to Hogwarts, despite suffering from lycanthropy, the condition that transforms a human into a werewolf during the full moon. Determined to provide Lupin with the education every young wizard deserves, Dumbledore orchestrated an elaborate system to accommodate the boy's monthly transformations while ensuring the safety of the student body. The Shrieking Shack formed the centerpiece of this plan. Connected to the Hogwarts grounds via a secret passage beneath the newly planted Whomping Willow, the isolated building provided a secure location where Lupin could undergo his painful transformations without endangering others. The reinforced interior was designed to withstand the strength and violence of a werewolf, while its distance from both Hogwarts and Hogsmeade proper minimized the risk of accidental discovery. Imagine young Remus Lupin being led through the tunnel by Madame Pomfrey as dusk approached on the night of a full moon. The walk would have been somber, filled with dread for what was to come. Upon reaching the shack, he would be left alone to face his transformation, a process described by Lupin himself as excruciating, where every bone breaks and reforms, where human consciousness is suppressed beneath the wolf's savage instincts. The hauntings for which the shack became famous were nothing more than the sounds of Lupin's suffering, his screams of pain during transformation, and the subsequent howls and destruction caused by the wolf in its frustrated confinement. Unable to hunt or roam as its nature demanded, the wolf would turn its aggression inward, biting and scratching itself throughout the long night. By morning, Lupin would transform back to his human form, often bearing new self-inflicted wounds that would eventually become permanent scars. Dumbledore, rather than attempting to suppress the inevitable rumors that arose from these monthly disturbances, ingeniously encouraged them. He hinted to the villagers of Hogsmeade that the building was haunted by particularly violent spirits, ensuring that curiosity would be tempered by fear, keeping potential explorers at bay. The strategy proved remarkably effective throughout Lupin's school years. Not a single villager attempted to investigate the shack during a full moon. The haunting sounds eventually became part of local folklore. Residents would speak in hushed tones of the restless spirits that dwelled within the shack, speculating about their identities and the tragic events that might have bound them to the location. Some claimed to hear multiple voices in anguished conversation. Others insisted they could distinguish the sounds of furniture being thrown against walls. The Three Broomsticks Tavern even developed a tradition of falling silent whenever the distant howls became audible, raising glasses in a toast to peaceful passing for the troubled souls. This carefully maintained deception might have continued indefinitely, had it not been for the curiosity and loyalty of Lupin's school friends. James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew eventually discovered Remus's secret during their second year at Hogwarts. Rather than rejecting their friend, they embarked on the extraordinarily complex process of becoming animagi, wizards capable of transforming into animals at will, a feat they accomplished without registration or supervision by their 5th year. Their achievement transformed the nature of Lupin's confinement in the Shrieking Shack. Werewolves, while deadly to humans, pose no threat to animals. In their animal forms, a stag, a large dog, and a rat, the three friends could safely accompany Lupin during full moons. More significantly, they could guide the werewolf out of the shack and into the forbidden forest, allowing it to expend its energy in running and exploring rather than self-harm. These midnight adventures, remembered later by Sirius Black as some of the happiest times of his life, marked a period when the Shrieking Shack fell eerily silent during full moons. The absence of the usual sounds briefly confused Hogsmeade residents, until new rumors suggested that the spirits had finally found peace, only to return more violently months later, when circumstances occasionally prevented the friends from their monthly excursions. After Lupin's graduation from Hogwarts in 1978, the Shrieking Shack truly fell silent. With no werewolf transformations occurring within its walls, the building's reputation gradually shifted from active haunting to historical curiosity. By the 1990s, it had become a standard feature of Hogsmeade ghost tours, though guides rarely ventured closer than the fence line, perpetuating the belief that the dwelling remained dangerous despite years of silence. The shack would have likely continued its quiet deterioration, were it not for a dramatic night in 1994, when it once again played host to a pivotal moment in wizarding history. It was here that Sirius Black, escaped prisoner and suspected mass murderer, revealed the truth of his innocence to Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger. Here, too, that the true betrayer of the Potters, Peter Pettigrew, was exposed after 12 years of hiding as Ron's pet rat, Scabbers. The dust-covered floors of the Shrieking Shack, which had borne witness to so much suffering years before, now supported a different kind of transformation, the shattering and rebuilding of truth, as Harry discovered his connection to a godfather he never knew he had. The building that had once protected the outside world from Remus Lupin now protected this fragile moment of revelation from outside interference, its fearsome reputation ensuring their privacy during this crucial conversation. 1 year later, the shack's connection to Lupin came full circle when he returned there during another full moon, this time having forgotten to take the wolfsbane potion that would have allowed him to maintain his human mind during transformation. The building once again served its original purpose, containing a fully transformed werewolf and preventing tragedy, though this incident would lead to Lupin's resignation from his position as defense against the dark arts professor when his condition became public knowledge. The final significant event in the Shrieking Shack's history occurred during the Battle of Hogwarts in 1998. Lord Voldemort, believing the Elder Wand's allegiance remained with its previous owner, summoned Severus Snape to the shack. In perhaps the most tragic scene ever to unfold within those weathered walls, Voldemort ordered his snake Nagini to kill Snape, believing this would transfer the wand's loyalty to himself. As Snape's life ebbed away on the dusty floor, the same floor where years earlier James Potter had once stood protectively over his son, he passed crucial memories to Harry Potter, revelations that would ultimately guide the young wizard in his final confrontation with Voldemort. Thus, the building that had begun as a haven designed by Dumbledore ended as the site of one of his most devoted servants' sacrifices, the location where the final pieces of the headmaster's grand strategy fell into place. In the years following the Second Wizarding War, debate arose regarding the Shrieking Shack's future. Some advocated for preservation as a historical landmark, noting its significance in the events leading to Voldemort's defeat. Others, including Remus Lupin's son Teddy, suggested that the building held too many painful memories and should be allowed to complete its gradual collapse into dust. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The exterior was stabilized to prevent further deterioration, while the interior was left untouched, a silent museum to its own complex history. A small plaque was installed at the perimeter, providing a brief explanation of the building's role in sheltering a young werewolf during his education, an acknowledgement of both Dumbledore's compassion and Lupin's courage that would have been unthinkable in the more prejudiced era when the arrangement began. Today, the Shrieking Shack stands as a monument to the unexpected ways in which a single structure can influence lives and events. Began as a simple solution to a logistical problem, where to safely house a werewolf during school terms, became, through chance and circumstance, a nexus for some of the most significant moments in the defeat of Lord Voldemort. As the evening grows deeper around us and shadows lengthen across the floor, consider this question: how often do the places we create for one purpose eventually serve another? And what might the walls around you now witness in years to come that you could never anticipate? Chapter 5. The Warnings of a Secrecy Censor. The gentle rain against our windows tonight reminds us of the subtle signs that often go unnoticed, similar to the quiet vibrations of a secrecy sensor detecting concealment and dishonesty. These curious magical devices, often overlooked in discussions of powerful magical artifacts, serve as silent guardians against deception in the wizarding world. Unlike more dramatic magical detection tools, the secrecy sensor's understated nature belies its sophisticated enchantments. Resembling an old-fashioned golden television antenna, these slender, vibrating devices have protected the wizarding community for centuries, though their modern refinement is relatively recent. The earliest version of what would become the secrecy sensor emerged in the late 1600s, shortly after the implementation of the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy. As wizarding communities withdrew from open interaction with Muggles, the need to prevent unauthorized sharing of magical information became paramount. Magical theorist Gondoline Oliphant developed what she called dissimulation detectors, delicate silver instruments that would emit puffs of purple smoke when exposed to active concealment spells or intentional falsehoods about magic. These primitive devices, while innovative, suffered from significant limitations. They could only detect the most obvious forms of magical hiding, were prone to false alarms when exposed to certain potion ingredients, and required frequent maintenance to remain operational. Their bulk and sensitivity made them impractical for widespread use, limiting their deployment to major institutions like the Ministry of Magic and Gringotts Bank. The transformation into the more refined device we recognize today occurred through the work of Arabella Nutley, the same talented witch who invented the mending charm. In the mid-1700s, Nutley recognized that Oliphant's detectors were responding not to the magic itself, but to the subtle disturbances in ambient magical fields created by active concealment. By recalibrating the detection mechanism to focus specifically on these disturbances, Nutley created a much more precise instrument. Her breakthrough came in the design itself, by adapting the shape to mimic the natural flow of magical energy, creating what resembled a golden antenna with multiple joints that could vibrate independently. She crafted a device that could physically resonate with different types of concealment. The stronger the deception, the more pronounced the vibration, allowing trained users to distinguish between minor misdirection and dangerous duplicity. Imagine the delicate calibration required. The sensor needed to be sensitive enough to detect intentional magical concealment while ignoring the countless minor enchantments that pervade wizarding spaces. This balance was achieved through a complex enchantment process involving exposure to graduated levels of concealment magic, from simple disillusionment charms to the most powerful invisibility enchantments available. Each exposure taught the sensor to recognize particular magical signatures, much like training a particularly sensitive magical creature. The modern manufacturing process for secrecy sensors takes place in specialized workshops, primarily in Switzerland and Japan, where the ambient magic is carefully controlled to prevent contamination of the sensitive components. Each sensor contains a core of demiguise hair, the same silvery substance used in the creation of invisibility cloaks, suspended in a solution of powdered moonstone and essence of myrtlap. This core is then enclosed within the golden antenna structure, which is inscribed with detection runes so tiny they can only be seen under magnification. By the early 1900s, secrecy sensors had become standard equipment for magical law enforcement throughout Europe and North America. Oars carried pocket-sized versions during investigations, while larger models were installed at the entrances to sensitive magical locations. Their reliability and relative subtlety, compared to the dramatic reactions of probity probes or sneakoscopes, made them particularly valuable for covert operations. The British Ministry of Magic maintained one of the most extensive networks of secrecy sensors, with over 300 devices strategically placed throughout its headquarters. These sensors were connected to a central monitoring system in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, allowing for immediate response to any detection of unauthorized concealment magic. This system proved invaluable during both wizarding wars, identifying infiltrators attempting to use polyjuice potion or disillusionment charms to access restricted areas. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry notably increased its use of secrecy sensors during Dolores Umbridge's tenure as High Inquisitor. Filch, the caretaker, would scan students entering the castle with handheld sensors, particularly targeting members of Dumbledore's army, suspected of carrying forbidden items or communicating secretly about unsanctioned meetings. The students quickly learned that the sensors could detect not only magical concealment, but also objects enchanted to carry hidden messages or disguised purposes. What many failed to realize, however, was the limited scope of the sensor's capabilities. While extraordinarily sensitive to active magical concealment, they cannot detect objects whose concealment properties are inherent rather than applied. Thus, Harry Potter's invisibility cloak, being a deathly hallow with intrinsic invisibility, rather than an object enchanted to become invisible, would not trigger a typical secrecy sensor. Similarly, information hidden through the Fidelius charm exists in a state beyond conventional concealment, rendering it undetectable to even the most sophisticated sensors. The limitations of secrecy sensors became particularly relevant during the Second Wizarding War. Death Eaters and their allies learned to circumvent standard detection by using methods that technically didn't qualify as concealment in the magical sense that sensors were calibrated to detect. For instance, rather than magically hiding dangerous objects, they might use complex transfiguration to make them appear as innocuous items, functionally hidden, but transformed rather than concealed. This vulnerability led to significant advances in sensor technology following Voldemort's defeat. Modern secrecy sensors now incorporate elements that can detect unstable transfiguration and certain forms of magical forgery, The Department of Mysteries maintains an ongoing research program dedicated to expanding the capabilities of detection devices, though the specific advances remain classified. The practical use of a secrecy sensor requires both training and intuition. Unlike sneakoscopes, which react dramatically to any untrustworthy behavior, secrecy sensors respond with subtle gradations of vibration that must be correctly interpreted. Horrors typically undergo several months of training to recognize different patterns of movement corresponding to various forms of concealment. The most skilled practitioners can distinguish between a simple disillusionment charm and the effects of polyjuice potion merely by observing the particular frequency of the sensor's vibration. Beyond their security applications, secrecy sensors have found surprising uses in magical medicine and research. At St. Mungo's Hospital, modified sensors assist healers in detecting concealed magical injuries, wounds hidden by either the patient's own magic or by curses designed to prevent treatment. Researchers studying magical creatures have developed specialized sensors to locate species with natural invisibility or camouflage abilities, such as demiguises and certain rare varieties of magical serpents. Perhaps the most fascinating adaptation came from magizoologist Newton Scamander, who created a network of miniaturized sensors to study the magical concealment properties of various creatures. His research revealed that many magical beings produce distinctive concealment signatures as unique as fingerprints, allowing for the identification of specific creatures even when they remain invisible to the naked eye. The relationship between secrecy sensors and privacy has generated ongoing ethical debates within the wizarding community. While few question their use in high-security environments like Gringotts or the Department of Mysteries, their deployment in more public spaces has proven controversial. The installation of sensors at the entrance to Diagon Alley in 1998, immediately following the Second Wizarding War, prompted protests from civil liberties advocates concerned about unreasonable intrusion into the private magical practices of ordinary witches and wizards. This tension between security and privacy reached its peak during Minister Pius Thickness's administration, actually controlled by Voldemort, when enhanced secrecy sensors were installed in private homes without consent, ostensibly to protect residents from disguised intruders. In reality, these devices reported directly to the corrupt ministry, identifying households harboring Muggle-borns or others hiding from persecution. This misuse significantly damaged public trust in the technology, leading to strict regulations on sensor deployment following the war's conclusion. Modern wizarding law now requires clear notification of active secrecy sensors in public spaces, typically through small golden plaques depicting the sensor's distinctive antenna shape. Private use remains legal but subject to restrictions. Sensors cannot be used to monitor others without their knowledge, and evidence obtained through unauthorized sensing is inadmissible before the Wizengamot. For the average witch or wizard, encounters with secrecy sensors typically occur during security screenings at major magical institutions. Gringotts requires all visitors to pass through sensor checkpoints before accessing high-security vaults. The Ministry of Magic maintains sensor arrays at every entrance, calibrated to detect not only physical concealment, but also certain types of mental occlusion associated with those attempting to hide their true intentions. What many find unnerving about secrecy sensors is their subtle suggestion that deception can be objectively detected, that truth and falsehood leave distinct magical signatures that no amount of skill can perfectly disguise. This notion challenges the comfortable belief that our secrets remain truly our own, that what we choose to conceal stays hidden at our discretion rather than merely escaping detection through technological limitations. As we conclude our exploration of these fascinating devices, their golden antennae vibrating silently in countless wizarding institutions around the world, consider this question. In a world where deception can be mechanically detected, what forms of truth-telling remain truly voluntary, and how might the very existence of such detection change the nature of the truths we choose to tell? Chapter 6. The Battle of Hogwarts. The embers in our fireplace burn low now, casting long shadows across the room, as we turn to one of the most consequential events in modern wizarding history. Like those embers, small points of light amid encroaching darkness, the courage of countless individuals illuminated the night of May 2nd, 1998, when Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry became the site of a battle that would determine the fate of the wizarding world. The gathering storm had been building for months. Lord Voldemort's forces had systematically gained control of every major wizarding institution in Britain. The Ministry had fallen the previous summer. Hogwarts itself had been under the oppressive regime of Headmaster Severus Snape and the Carrow siblings, and even Gringotts had been compromised. For those who opposed the Dark Lord, options for resistance had dwindled to desperate measures and hidden acts of defiance. The catalyst that transformed this simmering conflict into open battle came unexpectedly. Harry Potter's return to Hogwarts after months in hiding. Word of his appearance in Hogsmeade spread rapidly through both the remaining members of Dumbledore's army, who had maintained a secret resistance within the school, and the wider network of the Order of the Phoenix. Simultaneously, through the Death Eater Alecto Carrow's dark mark, Voldemort himself learned of Harry's location, setting in motion the inevitable confrontation. Imagine the Great Hall of Hogwarts on that evening, the enchanted ceiling reflecting an unusually clear night sky, stars twinkling obliviously above the human drama unfolding below. Students gathered in confusion as Professor McGonagall ordered the evacuation of those too young to fight. The air hummed with tension and fear as Voldemort's magically amplified voice echoed through the castle, demanding Harry Potter be turned over by midnight or face the consequences. The decision to stand and fight wasn't made in a single dramatic moment, but through hundreds of individual choices. Neville Longbottom, once considered barely capable enough to attend Hogwarts, stood firm without hesitation. Luna Lovegood, often dismissed as peculiar and detached, demonstrated crystalline clarity in her loyalty. The Weasley family arrived en masse, their bright red hair like banners of defiance against the darkness. Even students of Slytherin House, after initial hesitation, saw some of their number return to fight alongside classmates they had often considered rivals. As midnight approached, the defenders worked with remarkable efficiency to prepare the ancient castle for siege. Professor Flitwick, the diminutive charms master, orchestrated complex defensive enchantments around the perimeter. Professor Sprout and Neville gathered the most dangerous plants from the greenhouses, venomous tentacula and snargaluff pods, to hurl at attackers. Suits of armor, animated by Professor McGonagall's Pier Totem locomotor spell, marched to defend the battlements, their metal footsteps echoing through corridors that had known only the patter of students' feet for centuries. Outside the castle walls, Death Eaters assembled in the Forbidden Forest, their black robes making them nearly invisible against the night, except for the occasional gleam of silver masks in the moonlight. Giants recruited from the mountains of Eastern Europe lumbered among them, while Dementors drifted above like tattered shadows, eager to feed on the fear and despair soon to be unleashed. Acromantulas from the forest depths, persuaded or coerced into alliance with Voldemort, clicked their pincers in anticipation of the feast to come. The first assault came precisely at midnight, a barrage of spells directed at the castle's magical protections. The shield enchantments held initially, creating a vast, shimmering dome over Hogwarts that illuminated the grounds in eerie blue light. Each spell that struck the barrier sent ripples across its surface, like stones dropped into a pond. For a moment, it seemed the ancient protections might withstand even this unprecedented attack, but the shield began to falter under the concentrated assault of dozens of Death Eaters. Cracks appeared in the magical barrier, spreading like frost across glass, until with a sound like a massive bell being struck, the protection shattered completely. The battle had truly begun. What followed was chaos carefully orchestrated by both sides. Death Eaters stormed the grounds, while defenders cast spells from windows, towers, and improvised barricades. Giants tore at the castle walls with enormous clubs and bare hands, while animated statues grappled with them in surreal, slow-motion combat. Acromantulas swarmed up the stone walls, only to be repelled by blasts of spellfire from students who had just months earlier been studying theory in classrooms. Inside the castle, corridors became battlegrounds, where classmates fought side by side against enemies who showed no hesitation in using unforgivable curses. The marble staircase, where so many students had nervously ascended on their first day at Hogwarts, became slick with blood. Portraits that had watched generations of students pass evacuated their frames, either fleeing to safer locations or rushing between paintings to carry messages and warnings to fighters throughout the castle. Moments of individual courage punctuated the wider chaos. Lavender Brown, known more for gossip than bravery, stood her ground against the werewolf Fenrir Greyback until being overwhelmingly attacked. Professor Trelawney, emerging from her tower with unexpected ferocity, hurled crystal balls at attackers with surprising accuracy. The house elf creature led his fellow elves from the kitchens, armed with carving knives and cleavers, their high voices crying, "Fight for Master Harry," as they stabbed at Death Eater's ankles and shins. The Room of Requirement, which had served as both sanctuary and training ground for Dumbledore's army, became the unexpected location of one Horcrux's destruction. Vincent Crabbe, demonstrating fatal overconfidence, unleashed fiendfire, cursed flame of extraordinary destructive power that he could not control. The enchanted room, which had adapted itself to so many needs over centuries, could not withstand this onslaught from within. As the magical flames consumed everything, Ravenclaw's diadem melted, destroying the fragment of Voldemort's soul it contained. Throughout the castle, small tragedies unfolded amid the larger conflict. Colin Creevey, too young to officially participate, but unwilling to stay behind, fell to a Death Eater's curse. Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks, who had briefly known the joy of parenthood, died within hours of each other, their bodies later found side by side in the Great Hall. Fred Weasley, whose laughter had so often echoed through Hogwarts corridors, was killed when an explosion tore through a wall, his final smile still etched on his face as his family gathered around him in grief. The battle seemed to reach its darkest moment when Voldemort called a temporary halt to the fighting, offering his enemies 1 hour to tend their wounded and surrender Harry Potter. It was during this lull that Harry, having discovered through Snape's memories the truth of his connection to Voldemort, made the most difficult journey of his life, walking alone into the Forbidden Forest to meet his death. What transpired there, in the clearing where Voldemort and his inner circle waited, remains one of the most discussed moments in wizarding history. Harry Potter, willingly accepting death to destroy the Horcrux within himself, survived the killing curse for a second time. Whether through the protection of his mother's sacrifice, the Elder Wand's refusal to kill its true master, or some deeper magic not fully understood, Harry returned from the threshold of death, while the fragment of Voldemort's soul was destroyed. The battle's final phase began with a scene of terrible grandeur. Voldemort's procession from the forest, Hagrid forced to carry what all believed was Harry Potter's body. The collective grief that erupted from the defenders at this sight temporarily overcame their fear, leading to renewed resistance even in what seemed the moment of defeat. Neville Longbottom, showing extraordinary courage, defied Voldemort directly before drawing the sword of Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat and beheading Nagini, destroying the final Horcrux. The revelation that Harry still lived transformed the battle. Reinforcements arrived, centaurs from the forest, the Strolls from the sky, and even the mercantile Horace Slughorn leading residents of Hogsmeade into the fray. The fighting moved into the Great Hall itself, the heart of Hogwarts, where hundreds of duels erupted simultaneously across the flagstone floor, where students had eaten thousands of meals throughout the school's long history. Particular focus fell on Molly Weasley's duel with Bellatrix Lestrange, a mother's fury channeled into magical combat of extraordinary intensity. Her cry of "Not my daughter, you bitch," echoed through the hall moments before she struck down Voldemort's most devoted follower, demonstrating that the love Voldemort consistently underestimated could manifest as a formidable weapon. The climactic confrontation between Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort unfolded before hundreds of witnesses, perhaps the most public magical duel in modern history. Unlike the spectacular displays that had characterized much of the battle, this final confrontation was almost austere in its simplicity, a single disarming charm from Harry against Voldemort's killing curse. When these spells met, the Elder Wand, recognizing Harry as its true master, refused to harm him. The killing curse rebounded upon its caster, and Tom Riddle, the brilliant student who became Lord Voldemort, fell dead, killed not by elaborate magic, but by his own spell and his fundamental misunderstanding of wand lore and love. In the immediate aftermath, exhausted fighters stood in stunned silence. The sun had risen during the final confrontation, and its light now streamed through the broken windows of the great hall, illuminating the scene in stark clarity. The dead laid respectfully along one wall, the wounded being treated by Madame Pomfrey and volunteers, dust and debris covering everything. After months of darkness and fear, many survivors found themselves unable to immediately comprehend that the war had ended, that Voldemort was truly gone. The process of rebuilding began almost immediately, both literally in the reconstruction of Hogwarts' damaged structures and figuratively in the reformation of wizarding society. The physical repairs to the castle, while extensive, proved relatively straightforward thanks to the combined efforts of faculty, house elves, and ministry specialists. Within 3 months, the most significant structural damage had been addressed, though subtle signs of the battle remained visible for years. A scorched stone here, a replacement window there, small markers of what had transpired. The deeper healing took much longer. Memorials were established for those lost in the battle and the wider war. The anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts became a day of remembrance throughout Wizarding Britain, with ceremonies at the school attended by survivors and the families of those who fell. A simple monument was erected on the grounds, bearing the names of every defender who died, a testament to the fact that Hogwarts' greatest strength had always been not its walls or enchantments, but the courage of those who called it home. Perhaps the most profound consequence of the Battle of Hogwarts was its effect on inter-house relations. The artificial divisions that had separated students for centuries, particularly the isolation of Slytherin House, began to erode in the battle's aftermath. Those who fought side by side, regardless of house affiliation, formed bonds that transcended the traditional rivalries. When Hogwarts reopened for the following academic year, Headmistress McGonagall instituted several reforms to encourage greater unity, including mixed-house common areas and collaborative projects. As our fire dims to the faintest glow and night deepens around us, consider this. The Battle of Hogwarts was won not through superior magical power or tactical advantage, but through countless individual choices to stand against darkness, often at terrible personal cost. In what moments of your own life might you be called upon to choose between what is right and what is easy? And would you, like those young wizards and witches, find the courage to stand firm when it matters most? Chapter 7. The Life and Death of Cedric Diggory. Moonlight now streams through our window, casting a silvery glow reminiscent of a memory suspended in a pensieve. It seems fitting as we turn our attention to a young wizard, whose brief but luminous life left an indelible mark on all who knew him. In the tapestry of recent wizarding history, few threads shine with such poignant brightness as that of Cedric Diggory, a young man who embodied the finest qualities of Hufflepuff House, and whose tragic fate became inextricably linked with the return of the Dark Lord. Born in the autumn of 1977 to Amos and Eleanor Diggory, Cedric entered the world during the darkest days of the First Wizarding War. His early childhood was shaped by the cautious optimism that followed Voldemort's first defeat. Growing up in a modest wizarding home near Owlery St. Catchpole in Devon, the Diggory cottage, with its warm yellow door and garden full of magical plants tended by Eleanor, became known throughout the area as a haven of hospitality and kindness, qualities that would define their son throughout his life. Young Cedric displayed magical ability at an unusually early age, levitating his toy broomstick at just 14 months. Rather than the explosive, uncontrolled magic common in magical children, Cedric's early manifestations were remarkably gentle and purposeful. Neighbors recalled seeing the toddler surrounded by floating wildflowers that seemed to dance in patterns around him, responding to his laughter with synchronized movements, an early indication of his natural affinity for transfiguration and charms. His father Amos, who worked in the department for the regulation and control of magical creatures at the ministry, often took Cedric on expeditions into the surrounding countryside, teaching him to recognize various magical plants and creatures. These experiences fostered in Cedric a deep appreciation for the natural world and a characteristic patience that would later serve him well. Eleanor, a talented herbologist who supplied ingredients to apothecaries throughout Devon, similarly nurtured his curiosity and instilled in him the value of careful, methodical work. When Cedric received his Hogwarts letter in the summer of 1989, there was little doubt which house would claim him. Though possessing qualities that would have made him welcome in any of the 4 houses, the intelligence valued by Ravenclaw, the courage appreciated in Gryffindor, and even the ambition recognized by Slytherin, it was his unwavering fairness and dedication that led the Sorting Hat to place him in Hufflepuff within moments of touching his head. Cedric's years at Hogwarts unfolded with a quiet excellence that exemplified the often underappreciated virtues of his house. Academically, he excelled particularly in transfiguration and care of magical creatures, earning consistent praise from Professors McGonagall and Kettleburn. Unlike some top students who guarded their knowledge, Cedric became known for organizing study groups that included struggling classmates from all houses, demonstrating early on his gift for bringing people together across traditional divides. His natural athletic ability emerged during his second year, when he joined the Hufflepuff Quidditch team as a seeker. On the pitch, Cedric combined remarkable reflexes with a strategic mind, studying opponents' patterns and anticipating their movements rather than relying solely on speed. By his 5th year, he had been appointed team captain, leading Hufflepuff to its strongest season in decade, spearies and breaking a long-standing losing streak against Gryffindor, though he later insisted on a rematch when he learned Dementors had caused Harry Potter to fall from his broom, considering the victory unfair despite its technical legitimacy. This decision, perhaps more than any other single action, illustrated the core of Cedric's character. In a school environment where house rivalries often overshadowed more important values, his insistence on fairness, even at the expense of his own house's glory, marked him as exceptional. Professor Sprout, his head of house, would later cite this moment when nominating him for prefect, noting that Diggory exemplifies the truth that there is nothing soft about fairness. It often requires the hardest kind of courage. As a prefect, Cedric approached his duties with characteristic thoroughness and compassion. First years from all houses soon learned that if they found themselves lost in Hogwarts' confusing corridors, the tall Hufflepuff prefect would not only guide them to their destination, but teach them useful landmarks to prevent future confusion. When enforcing rules, he showed remarkable discernment between youthful high spirits and genuine troublemaking, earning respect even from dedicated mischief makers like Fred and George Weasley, who notably described him as annoyingly decent about taking points. His selection as Hogwarts champion for the Triwizard Tournament in his final year came as no surprise to those who knew him well. Stan. Ding before the Great Hall. After the Goblet of Fire spoke his name, Cedric embodied the hopes of Hufflepuff House, so long overshadowed by the more dramatic achievements of other houses, and accepted the honor with characteristic humility. In that moment, his fellow Hufflepuffs saw the validation of qualities they had always valued: dedication, fair play, and quiet strength. The unexpected selection of Harry Potter as a second Hogwarts champion tested Cedric's character in ways that revealed its true depth. While many students, including some in his own house, turned against Harry with accusations of cheating, Cedric reserved judgment. Though initially confused and perhaps disappointed at sharing what should have been Hufflepuff's moment of recognition, he never indulged in resentment. Instead, He focused on representing Hogwarts to the best of his ability, while maintaining the sportsmanship that defined him. Throughout the tournament, Cedric navigated each task with a combination of careful planning and adaptability. For the first task involving dragons, he employed a transfiguration strategy, partially transforming a rock into a Labrador to distract the Swedish short snout, demonstrating both his academic strength and creativity under pressure. Though the dragon eventually turned its attention back to him, resulting in minor burns, his quick thinking and precision earned him high marks from the judges. The second task revealed aspects of Cedric's personal life that had remained relatively private. His selection of Cho Chang as what he would most sorely miss confirmed rumors of their relationship that had circulated through Hogwarts' ever-active gossip networks. Friends later recalled that Cedric had first noticed Cho not during a Quidditch match against Ravenclaw, as many assumed, but in the library, where he had been impressed by her elegant solution to a complex arithmancy problem. Their relationship, characterized by mutual respect and shared interests, particularly in magical theory, offered a glimpse of the mature young man behind the exemplary student and athlete. Perhaps the most telling moment of Cedric's tournament performance came during the maze, the third and final task. Upon encountering a disoriented Victor Crumb, who had been placed under the Imperious Curse, Cedric was attacked and nearly subjected to the Cruciatus Curse. Though Harry Potter's intervention saved him, Cedric's immediate concern was not for himself, but for the clearly unwell Crumb. Even in a competitive situation with the Triwizard Cup at stake, his instinct was toward compassion rather than advantage. The same quality manifested in his most famous action during the tournament, the moment when, reaching the Triwizard Cup simultaneously with Harry Potter, after they had helped each other through multiple obstacles, he insisted they take it together. "We've both earned it," he said, in what would become his last act of fairness. Neither could have known that the cup had been transformed into a portkey by Barty Crouch Jr., designed to deliver Harry to Voldemort for the ritual that would restore the Dark Lord to physical form. What happened in the graveyard of Little Hangleton exists now in wizarding history through Harry Potter's testimony. Upon their unexpected arrival, Cedric's confusion quickly turned to alertness, his wand at the ready as he sensed the danger of their situation. His final words, "Wands out, do you reckon?" displayed the calm readiness that had characterized his approach to challenges throughout his life. Moments later, before he could even defend himself, Cedric Diggory fell to Peter Pettigrew's killing curse, issued under Voldemort's chilling command, "Kill the Spare." Those 3 words, "kill the Spare," perhaps demonstrate more clearly than anything else the fundamental contrast between Voldemort's worldview and the values Cedric embodied. To the Dark Lord, human life held value only in its utility toward his aims. Someone who presented neither threat nor advantage was simply a complication to be eliminated. Nothing could have been further from Cedric's own philosophy, in which every person deserved dignity and fair treatment regardless of their usefulness or status. The return of Cedric's body to Hogwarts created one of the most haunting scenes in the school's recent history. Materializing on the edge of the maze with Harry clinging to him, the crowd initially erupted in cheers, believing they were witnessing a victorious conclusion to the tournament. The gradual wave of horrified realization that swept through the spectators as they recognized the stillness of Cedric's form transformed celebration into tragedy within moments. His father's agonized cry, "That's my boy," echoed across the grounds, a sound that many present would later describe as having haunted their dreams for years afterward. In the immediate aftermath, as the wizarding world grappled with the shock of both Cedric's death and Voldemort's return, his memory became entangled in politics. Minister Fudge, unwilling to accept the implications of the Dark Lord's resurrection, implied that Cedric's death was a tragic accident. This characterization, so insufficient to capture the reality of his murder, caused additional pain to those who loved him and served as a bitter preview of the Ministry's year-long denial campaign. Albus Dumbledore, however, ensured that the truth of Cedric's death was honored within Hogwarts. His end-of-term address to the student body specifically named Cedric as a victim of murder by Lord Voldemort, adding that, to attribute his death to an accident would be an insult to his memory. In advocating for remembering Cedric, Dumbledore highlighted the qualities that had made him exceptional: exceptional diligence, exceptional kindness, and exceptional bravery. The grief that followed Cedric's death rippled through many communities. Within Hogwarts, Hufflepuff House mourned the loss of a student who had embodied their finest values. Cho Chang's grief manifested in ways that affected her academic performance and social relationships throughout the following year. The Hufflepuff Quidditch team flew with black armbands the next season, and left the seeker position vacant for their first match, playing with 6 rather than the usual 7 players, a gesture of respect that resulted in a loss, but earned them admiration from all houses. In the wider wizarding world, the Diggory's grief became a private matter, largely shielded from public view. Amos Diggory took extended leave from the ministry, eventually returning to a different department, where he would not have to face daily reminders of the plans he had shared with colleagues for his son's promising future. Eleanor Diggory channeled her grief into establishing a foundation that provided scholarships for students interested in magizoology, honoring Cedric's love for magical creatures, and ensuring that something constructive would emerge from their loss. As the wizarding world descended into the Second Wizarding War, Cedric's memory served different purposes for different groups. For those who denied Voldemort's return, he remained an uncomfortable reminder of questions unanswered. For those in the Resistance, particularly Dumbledore's army, he represented one of the first casualties in a conflict many didn't yet recognize. His photograph stood alongside those of others, lost to Voldemort's forces in the Room of Requirement, a silent reminder of the stakes of their preparation. Perhaps Cedric's most significant legacy lay in his influence on Harry Potter, who carried the weight of witnessing his murder throughout the war. In moments of doubt, the memory of Cedric's fairness and courage served as a standard against which Harry measured difficult decisions. The guilt of having suggested they take the cup together, inadvertently leading Cedric to his death, transformed over time into a determination that such deaths should not be in vain. When Harry walked into the Forbidden Forest years later, prepared to sacrifice himself to defeat Voldemort, Cedric was among the spirits who accompanied him through the Resurrection Stone, offering reassurance and demonstrating that the connection forged in that graveyard transcended death itself. In the years following Voldemort's defeat, Hogwarts established several memorials to honor those lost in the war. Among them, a bronze statue of Cedric stands in a courtyard near the Hufflepuff Common Room. Rather than depicting him with the Triwizard Cup, or in a heroic pose, the statue shows him seated on a bench with an open textbook, making space beside him as if inviting others to join, capturing the everyday generosity that had defined him more accurately than any grand gesture could have done. Annual memorial services held on the anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts also honor Cedric and others who fell before the final confrontation. Former classmates speak of how his example influenced their own choices during the darkest days of Voldemort's regime, many citing his unfailing fairness as a standard they strive to maintain even when fear might have justified compromise. As moonlight fades and we approach the deepest part of night, consider this. In a world that often celebrates the most dramatic expressions of heroism, what might we learn from Cedric Diggory's quiet excellence? How might our daily choices to embrace fairness, kindness, and integrity, even when they offer no immediate reward, shape not only our own character, but the experiences of countless others whose lives intersect with ours in ways we may never fully recognize? Chapter 8. The Complexity of the Fidelius Charm. The night has grown deeper now, and secrets seem to whisper from the shadows around us. How fitting, then, to turn our attention to perhaps the most profound magical concealment ever devised, the Fidelius Charm, an enchantment of such intricate complexity that it transcends ordinary magic to touch upon the metaphysical nature of truth itself. Unlike simpler concealment spells that merely hide physical appearance, the Fidelius Charm operates on a more fundamental level, concealing not just an object or location, but its very existence within the fabric of reality as experienced by others. The charm takes a secret, typically the location of a person or place, and implants it within the soul of a chosen individual, the secret keeper. Once performed, the secret becomes impossible to discover by any means, regardless of how many previously knew it, unless the secret keeper willingly divulges it. The origins of this extraordinary magic reach back to the tumultuous period of wizarding persecution during the early medieval era. Historical records suggest that a Greek witch named Irene Philomela developed the charm around 800 CE as a means of protecting isolated magical communities from detection. The earliest documented use appears in the journals of the wizard Constantinos of Thessaloniki, who described witnessing an entire village of 43 souls vanish from knowledge, though I had visited it weekly since childhood. Only when a designated guardian whispered the location to him did the village reappear in his awareness, not physically manifesting, but rather re-entering his ability to perceive what had been there all along. The theoretical foundations of the Fidelius charm demonstrate why it stands among the most challenging magic known to wizard kind. Unlike conventional protective enchantments that create barriers or deflections, the Fidelius operates on the principle of existential concealment. It does not prevent people from seeing a location, but rather prevents the location from existing in their consciousness at all. Even if a wizard stood directly before a dwelling protected by the Fidelius charm, they would perceive only what should logically exist in that space instead. An empty lot, perhaps, or an unbroken stretch of hillside, their mind automatically compensating for the impossible absence in their perception. This characteristic makes the charm uniquely powerful, as it cannot be overcome by any known counterspell or detection method. Even the most accomplished legilimens cannot extract knowledge of a Fidelius-protected secret from someone's mind if they are not the secret keeper, simply because the information does not exist within that mind to be extracted. Similarly, magical maps, location spells, or tracking enchantments fail completely. The secret location exists in a state of magical quantum uncertainty, simultaneously present and absent from reality, depending on one's relationship to the secret keeper. The casting of the Fidelius charm requires extraordinary magical skill and preparation. Historical accounts and modern magical theory suggest that the process involves several distinct phases, beginning with extensive preparation of the location to be concealed. The boundaries of the secret must be precisely defined through a complex series of arithmetic calculations that account for both physical space and conceptual identity. A castle, for instance, might be defined not merely by its walls, but by the historical and cultural understanding of what constitutes that specific castle in magical consciousness. Once these boundaries are established, the primary incantation, which remains one of wizardkind's most closely guarded formulas, typically transmitted directly from master to apprentice rather than written down, must be performed at a cosmically significant moment. Traditional practice favors the precise midpoint between sunset and sunrise, when the boundaries between seen and unseen are naturally at their most permeable. The casting typically requires sustained magical focus for several hours, during which the caster's magical energy forms a lattice-like structure that gradually encapsulates the secret. The final and most crucial phase involves the transference of the secret into the soul of the chosen secret keeper. This metaphysical process creates a symbiotic relationship between the person and the secret itself, such that the secret becomes almost a living entity nested within the keeper's being. The intense magical and psychological demands of this process explain why the Fidelius charm cannot be performed casually or frequently. Historical records indicate that even the most powerful witches and wizards rarely cast it more than 2 or 3 times in their lives. The unique properties of the Fidelius charm have made it a subject of intensive study by the Department of Mysteries, particularly within the sub-department concerned with the nature of consciousness and reality. Unspeakables have theorized that the charm may represent one of the few instances where magic directly manipulates what philosophers call consensus reality, the shared understanding that allows us to perceive the world similarly. By extracting a secret from this consensus and anchoring it within a single soul, the charm creates a controlled metaphysical anomaly. a blind spot in collective reality that can only be restored through the deliberate act of sharing by the secret keeper. This extraordinary power comes with equally significant limitations and vulnerabilities. The most obvious lies in the charm's complete dependence on the trustworthiness of the secret keeper. No magical binding can prevent a secret keeper from revealing the information if they choose to do so, or are coerced through torture, veritaserum, or the imperious curse. The secret, once extracted from consensus reality, requires a human vessel precisely because human choice and free will cannot be magically constrained without compromising the integrity of the charm itself. Historical accounts reveal numerous instances where the betrayal of a secret keeper led to tragedy. The infamous case of Venetian wizarding nobles in 1487 saw an entire magical bloodline eliminated when their secret keeper, under torture by magical inquisitors, revealed the location of their hidden island estate. More recently, of course, the betrayal of the Potters by Peter Pettigrew stands as perhaps the most consequential failure of secret keeper selection in modern wizarding history. Beyond the vulnerability inherent in human trustworthiness, the Fidelius charm presents other complex limitations. The size and conceptual complexity of what can be hidden appears to have natural boundaries. While a building or even a small village can be concealed successfully, attempts to hide larger entities, such as an entire wizarding city or a geographical feature like a mountain, have historically resulted in unstable enchantments that fragment or collapse within days or weeks. This limitation likely arose from the charm's need to create a cohesive alternative perception for those unable to perceive the secret. The larger the concealed object, the more complex the alternative reality that must be maintained. Additionally, the charm interacts unpredictably with spaces that already contain significant magical properties. Attempts to place residences within magical districts like Diagon Alley under the Fidelius charm have occasionally resulted in dangerous magical resonances as the charm conflicts with the pre-existing enchantments that define the area. This explains why the Order of the Phoenix headquarters at Grimmauld Place, while located in Muggle London, required extensive preparation and multiple attempts before the Fidelius charm could be successfully applied. The relationship between a secret keeper and those with whom they share the secret deserves particular attention. When a secret keeper willingly reveals the protected information to another person, that person becomes capable of perceiving the hidden location or knowledge, but cannot pass this perception to others. This creates a closed network of awareness that can expand only through the direct action of the original secret keeper. The psychological effects of carrying such knowledge, being able to see what others cannot, yet unable to share this perception, has been compared to a mild form of cognitive dissonance, with some individuals reporting a persistent sensation of unreality when observing others fail to perceive what is plainly visible to them. The death of a secret keeper creates one of the most fascinating magical contingencies associated with the charm. Rather than causing the enchantment to collapse entirely, the death of the original repository of the secret causes the secret to fragment and transfer to every individual with whom the secret keeper had shared the information. Each of these individuals effectively becomes a new secret keeper, capable of revealing the location to others. This multiplication of secret keepers significantly weakens the protection, not through any diminishment of the charm itself, but simply through the increased statistical likelihood that at least one of the new keepers might, intentionally or accidentally, reveal the secret to someone untrustworthy. This post-mortem fragmentation occurred following the death of Albus Dumbledore, who had served as secret keeper for several locations associated with the Order of the Phoenix, including the aforementioned headquarters at Grimmauld Place. Every Order member who had received the secret from Dumbledore suddenly found themselves capable of sharing it with others, a development that eventually compromised the location, despite the continuing functionality of the charm itself. The ethical dimensions of the Fidelius charm have been debated extensively throughout magical history. The charm's ability to essentially remove knowledge from minds that previously possessed it raises profound questions about autonomy and consent. When the Potter's home in Godric's Hollow was placed under the Fidelius charm, Neighbors who had interacted with the family for years suddenly found themselves unable to recall the existence of their house, experiencing what many described as unsettling gaps in their memories and perceptions. This involuntary modification of others' awareness has led some magical ethicists to classify the Fidelius as bordering on a form of mass obliviation, raising questions about whether consent should be obtained from all affected parties before its implementation. Others counter that, in situations of genuine danger, such as during both wizarding wars, the protective benefits outweigh these ethical concerns, particularly when the alternative might be death or imprisonment. Less philosophically, but equally important, are the practical limitations the charm imposes on those it protects. Individuals hidden by the Fidelius charm often experience a form of isolation that extends beyond physical separation. The inability to be perceived by the wider world creates barriers to normal participation in society, employment, casual social interactions. Even receiving owl post all become complicated when one's very existence has been conceptually removed from general awareness. This explains why the charm, despite its extraordinary protective power, is typically employed only in the most desperate circumstances, and usually for limited durations. The magical theory surrounding the potential breaking or dispelling of the Fidelius charm remains largely theoretical, as no documented case exists of the charm being forcibly broken through counter-magic. Some theoretical work suggests that a magical event of sufficient magnitude, comparable perhaps to the destruction of a Horcrux or the rebounding of an Avada Kedavra curse, might be capable of creating a momentary tear in the metaphysical fabric that the charm manipulates, potentially allowing the secret to re-enter consensus reality. However, such theories remain untested and are generally considered speculative at best. Ministry regulations regarding the Fidelius charm reflect its exceptional status within magical law. Unlike many powerful spells that require registration or licensing, the Fidelius charm exists in a curious legal gray area. While not explicitly restricted, its use must be reported to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement within 14 days of casting, though this requirement was widely ignored during both wizarding wars. The Ministry maintains no central registry of active Fidelius charms, acknowledging that such a registry would fundamentally undermine the charm's purpose and potentially create a single point of vulnerability for multiple protected locations. In contemporary wizarding society, the Fidelius charm continues to represent the gold standard for magical protection in extreme circumstances. Certain divisions of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement maintain safe houses protected by the charm for witnesses requiring the highest level of protection. St. Mungo's Hospital reportedly maintains a specially warded wing under Fidelius for patients whose very existence must be kept secret for medical or security reasons. Even Gringotts is rumored to employ a variation of the charm for certain high-security vaults, though goblin magical traditions differ significantly from human practices in this area. For most witches and wizards, however, the Fidelius charm remains something encountered primarily through historical accounts and theoretical study, rather than personal experience. Its extraordinary requirements, both magical and interpersonal, ensure that it remains one of the rarest forms of magic performed in the wizarding world, a testament to magic's capacity to manipulate not just matter and energy, but the very nature of truth and perception themselves. As we sit here in the deepest part of night, surrounded by shadows that seem to hold their own secrets, consider if you were entrusted as a secret keeper, with someone's safety entirely dependent on your ability to maintain that trust, where would you draw the boundaries between loyalty to them and your other obligations? And in a world where truth itself can be magically contained within a single soul, what other fundamental aspects of reality might be more malleable than we typically assume? Chapter 9. The Post Office Owlery of Hogsmeade. Dawn approaches now, bringing with it the familiar sounds of stirring owls, a fitting accompaniment as we turn our attention to one of the wizarding world's most essential, yet often overlooked institutions, the Post Office Owlery of Hogsmeade, a marvel of organizational magic and avian partnership that has connected witches and wizards across continents for centuries. Standing at the north end of Hogsmeade's High Street, the post office building presents a modest facade that belies the remarkable operation within. The structure dates to 1703, when the growing wizarding settlement required more robust communication infrastructure than the informal message-carrying arrangements that had previously served the small community. The distinctive hexagonal architecture, with its six-sided central tower rising above surrounding buildings, was specifically designed to accommodate the complex flight patterns of returning owls, while providing optimal roosting conditions for the hundreds of birds that would eventually call it home. Approaching the building, one notices the curious absence of windows on the lower floors, a practical consideration given the nature of the business conducted within. Instead, the upper sections feature dozens of oval openings of varying sizes, designed to allow owls of all dimensions to come and go freely. These portals incorporate subtle weather-repelling charms that prevent rain or snow from entering while allowing free passage for feathered messengers. On clear evenings, the sight of owls streaming in and out against the twilight sky creates one of Hogsmeade's most enchanting vistas. The interior of the post office presents an environment unlike any other in the wizarding world, a careful balance between human workspace and avian habitat. The central atrium rises the full height of the building, encircled by 7 gallery levels connected by gently sloping ramps rather than stairs. Each gallery hosts owls of different types, organized primarily by flight range and carrying capacity rather than species. The air carries the distinctive sounds of hundreds of owls, the soft hooting of tawnies, the deeper calls of great horned owls, and the occasional screech of excitable screech owls, all blending into what regular patrons describe as organized natural chaos. Magical engineering solutions address the obvious challenges of housing so many birds indoors. Advanced vanishing spells continuously remove droppings and feathers, while carefully calibrated freshening charms maintain air quality without disturbing the sensitive respiratory systems of the owls. The temperature remains constant year-round through enchantments embedded in the stone walls themselves, providing an ideal environment for both the birds and the witches and wizards who work with them. The organizational system that governs the Hogsmeade Owlery has evolved over centuries into a model of magical efficiency. Owls are classified by color-coded leg bands that indicate their range C abilities: bronze for local deliveries within Scotland, silver for national service throughout Britain, gold for European destinations, and the prestigious platinum bands reserved for the specially bred long-distance owls capable of intercontinental flight. Further markings indicate specialties such as package carrying capacity, speed, or ability to navigate particularly challenging magical environments. At the heart of the post office's operations lies a remarkable piece of magical equipment, the destination directory. This enormous circular device, resembling a combination of astronomical clock and magical compass, dominates the ground floor. When a letter or package is placed on its central platform, enchanted needles spin rapidly before settling to indicate the most suitable owl for that particular delivery, taking into account distance, urgency, weather conditions along the route, and even the recipient's location relative to Muggle populations. For particularly remote or magically concealed destinations, the directory provides supplemental guidance notes that postal workers attach to the standard delivery instructions. The training program for post office owls represents some of the most sophisticated magical creature husbandry practiced anywhere in the wizarding world. Young owls, many bred specifically for postal service from lineages that have carried mail for generations, begin their training at approximately 3 months of age. The initial phase focuses on basic flight strength and navigation, with trainees making progressively longer journeys returning to the Owlery from various release points throughout Scotland. As they mature, potential postal owls learn to recognize common wizarding locations, follow specific routing instructions, and navigate through areas with heavy Muggle presence while maintaining appropriate discretion. The most promising candidates undergo advanced training in specialized delivery scenarios, navigating magical concealment, delivering to moving targets such as the night bus or wizarding ships, and developing the remarkable ability to locate recipients who have moved since a letter was sent, sometimes tracking them across considerable distances. The actual process of sending post from Hogsmeade begins at one of the 12 customer service counters that line the ground floor. Here, trained postal workers assess each item for appropriate postage based on distance, weight, and delivery speed. Unlike Muggle postal systems with standardized rates, Wizarding post pricing incorporates variables such as weather conditions along the route, magical properties of the item being sent, and even the phase of the moon, which affects certain delivery paths through areas of heightened magical activity. Payment is typically made in standard Wizarding currency, though the Hogsmeade Post Office maintains one of the most comprehensive currency exchange services in magical Britain, allowing for international transactions. For particularly remote international destinations, supplemental payment might include specialty owl treats, or, in the case of deliveries to certain traditional magical communities, symbolic tokens of appreciation that satisfy ancient customs regarding message carriers. Beyond standard letter delivery, the Hogsmeade Post Office offers a remarkable range of specialized services that showcase the versatility of their avian workforce and the ingenuity of Wizarding postal development. The Priority Postal Patronus Service, introduced in the late 1950s, combines traditional owl delivery with the Patronus charm for urgent messages requiring immediate attention. The sending wizard's Patronus accompanies the owl, providing both additional protection and arriving slightly ahead to alert the recipient of incoming urgent correspondence. For particularly sensitive or valuable deliveries, customers may request attribution owls, specially trained birds that carry a magical signature verification system. Upon delivery, these owls perform a simple authentication ritual, requiring the recipient to provide a wand signature matching predetermined magical parameters, ensuring that confidential materials reach only their intended recipient. This service became particularly valuable during both Wizarding Wars, when secure communication channels were essential for resistance efforts. The seasonal sending service caters to Wizarding families separated by long distances, particularly those with members working or studying internationally. Customers can arrange scheduled deliveries throughout the year, birthday gifts, holiday packages, or even regular care packages for Hogwarts students, with all details arranged in advance. The post office maintains these standing orders with remarkable precision, with some families having continuous service agreements spanning multiple generations. For those wishing to send temperature-sensitive items, potions, ingredients, certain magical plants, or perishable goods, the climate-controlled carrying service provides owls equipped with specially enchanted satchels that maintain specific environmental conditions regardless of external weather. These sophisticated carriers, developed in collaboration with both herbologists and potions masters, can preserve even the most delicate materials during long journeys, albeit at premium rates that reflect the complex magic involved. The relationship between postal workers and their avian colleagues represents one of the most unique professional partnerships in the Wizarding world. Unlike Handel, Ross of other magical creatures who maintain clear boundaries between human and beast, veteran postal workers develop deep bonds with the owls under their care, often working with the same birds for decades. Many owls demonstrate remarkable preference for specific handlers, performing at their best when paired with their favored human colleague. Madame Lavinia Moffat, who served as postmistress from 1921 to 1968, documented this unique relationship in her influential book, Wings and Wisdom, The Secret Language of Postal Owls. She identified subtle patterns of communication between experienced handlers and their birds that transcended basic training, approaching something like genuine conversation through a combination of specific hoots, wing positions, and behavioral cues. Madame Moffat's work revolutionized owl training methodologies throughout Britain and established the Hogsmeade Post Office as the preeminent authority on postal owl management. The international reach of the Hogsmeade Owlery extends far beyond the village itself. As one of 12 major owl postal centers across Wizarding Britain, with others including the London Central Magical Post Office, and the Manchester Merlin Memorial Owlery. It serves as a critical hub in the global wizarding communication network. International deliveries often involve complex relay systems, with long-distance specialist owls carrying correspondence to foreign postal centers where local birds complete the final delivery, an arrangement that maximizes efficiency while respecting the territorial instincts of postal owls. During particularly high-volume periods, such as the Christmas season or the weeks preceding the start of Hogwarts terms, when school letters and supply lists are distributed, the post office implements remarkable organizational adaptations. Retired postal owls are temporarily recalled to service, while off-duty ministry owls are sometimes seconded to assist with the increased workload. The logistics of these operations require complex magical tracking systems to manage the hundreds of additional deliveries, with the destination directory often operating continuously for days without reset. The historical significance of the Hogsmeade post office extends beyond its practical function. During the giant wars of the early 19th century, when conventional travel became dangerous throughout much of Scotland, the postal owls provided a crucial communication lifeline for isolated wizarding communities. Similarly, during the Goblin rebellions, when certain magical transportation networks were compromised, Owlpost remained reliable due to the general respect most magical beings accord to postal birds, a tradition dating back to ancient magical conventions establishing messengers as neutral parties in conflicts. Both wizarding wars saw the post office adapt to extraordinary circumstances. During Voldemort's first rise to power, sophisticated screening charms were developed to detect cursed mail, while counter-surveillance measures protected the contents of legitimate correspondence from interception. In the Second Wizarding War, when the Ministry fell under Death Eater control, postal workers quietly established alternative delivery networks for those in danger, often routing sensitive communications through multiple international relays to avoid detection by the compromised Ministry mail monitoring systems. The post office's role in maintaining connections between Hogwarts students and their families deserves special mention. For centuries, the sight of owls descending into the Great Hall during breakfast has been a quintessential part of the Hogwarts experience. During term time, a dedicated Hogsmeade postal team coordinates closely with the Hogwarts Owlery, managing the considerable volume of packages, letters, and newspaper deliveries that flow to and from the school daily. For many Muggle-born students especially, these owl deliveries represent an important link to family while they navigate the unfamiliar wizarding world. The comparison between Owl Post and Muggle postal systems offers fascinating insights into the different approaches to similar challenges. While Muggles have developed increasingly mechanical and electronic solutions, the wizarding world has refined the ancient partnership between humans and birds. Postal officials who have studied both systems note that despite the apparent simplicity of Owl Post compared to complex Muggle logistics networks, the magical system often demonstrates comparable or superior reliability, particularly in adverse weather conditions or remote locations. This relationship extends to emergency services as well. The Hogsmeade Post Office maintains a permanent urgent response roster, specially trained owls and handlers prepared to deliver critical messages regardless of conditions. These elite postal teams have played crucial roles during wizarding emergencies, from delivering evacuation warnings during magical catastrophes to carrying urgent requests for medical assistance to remote locations beyond the reach of flu networks or apparition. The economics of Owl Postal Service reflect the unique values of wizarding society. Unlike the profit-driven approach of many Muggle enterprises, the post office operates on principles closer to a public trust. While basic operational costs are covered through standard postage fees, the institution receives supplemental funding from the Department of Magical Transportation, acknowledging its essential role in wizarding infrastructure. This arrangement allows the post office to maintain services to remote magical communities that would otherwise be economically impractical to support. The future of Owl Post in an increasingly connected magical world presents both challenges and opportunities. While instantaneous communication methods like the flu network offer advantages for urgent messages, they lack the security, tangibility, and personal touch that owl-delivered correspondence provides. Rather than competing directly with these alternatives, the Hogsmeade Post Office has evolved towards specialized services that emphasize the unique capabilities of owls: discretion, the ability to find recipients regardless of magical concealment, and the capacity to deliver physical objects rather than just information. Recent innovations include the development of enhanced memory breeding, postal owls with genetically reinforced recall capabilities that can memorize verbal messages, in addition to carrying written ones, providing an additional layer of security for sensitive communications. Another advancement, the atmospheric navigation system, allows specially trained owls to identify and utilize naturally occurring magical air currents, significantly reducing delivery times for certain routes. As our exploration of the Hogsmeade Post Office draws to a close, and morning light begins to filter through our windows, consider this question: what might we learn from the wizarding world's continued reliance on a system that fundamentally depends on the relationship between living beings? Perhaps there lies a wisdom in these ancient methods that transcends mere efficiency, a recognition that how we choose to connect with one another carries meaning beyond the simple transmission of information. Chapter 10. The Readings of a Probity Probe. Morning light now streams fully through our windows, illuminating dust motes that dance like tiny revelations in the air, not unlike the subtle disturbances detected by one of the wizarding world's most sophisticated security devices. Let us turn our attention to the Probity Probe, an instrument whose seemingly simple appearance masks complex enchantments capable of detecting the deepest deceptions and concealments. Resembling an ordinary thin golden rod about the length of a wizard's forearm, the Probity Probe represents centuries of magical development in the field of detection enchantments. Unlike more dramatic security devices that emit loud alarms or visible signals, the probe operates with subtle precision, vibrating gently in its operator's hand when it encounters dishonesty or concealment, a discreet approach that allows for security screening without causing undue alarm or embarrassment. The earliest version of what would eventually become the modern Probity Probe emerged during the Goblin rebellions of the 17th century. Wizarding financial institutions, concerned about concealed weapons or unauthorized magical items being brought into their establishments, commissioned the renowned magical artificer Artemisia Wilkes to develop a detection device more refined than existing secrecy sensors. Wilkes, known for her pioneering work combining arithmancy with enchantment, developed what she called the Veracity Wand, a prototype that could identify simple magical concealments through disturbances in ambient magical fields. This early version, while innovative, suffered from significant limitations. It responded primarily to active concealment spells rather than inherently deceptive objects, and generated false readings when exposed to certain benign magical items. Most problematically, it required considerable magical power from its operator, making extended use physically taxing. Despite these drawbacks, the basic principles established by Wilkes would guide the development of detection instruments for centuries to come. The transformation into the more sophisticated device we recognize today occurred through the work of Oswald Whitlock, a former Auror who turned his attention to security enchantments after retiring from active service in the 1820s. Drawing on his extensive field experience detecting dark wizards, Whitlock recognized that deception manifests in magical signatures distinct from ordinary enchantments. By calibrating detection instruments specifically to these signatures rather than general magical activity, he created a much more precise device. Whitlock's innovation involved incorporating strands of demiguise hair, the same silvery substance used in invisibility cloaks, within a core of highly refined goblin silver. This seemingly counterintuitive combination created a remarkable magical resonance. The demiguise hair, inherently associated with concealment, would vibrate sympathetically when exposed to similar concealment magic, while the goblin silver conducted this vibration to the handle in a form detectable by the operator. The entire assembly was then subjected to a complex sequence of enchantments, performed over a lunar month. binding the detection properties permanently into the instrument. The modern manufacturing process for Probity probes takes place primarily in a specialized workshop in Upper Flagley, Yorkshire, where the techniques pioneered by Whitlock have been refined, but not fundamentally altered. Each probe requires materials of exceptional quality: goblin silver of 99.9% purity, hair from mature demiguises, preferably those at least 40 years old, when their concealment abilities reach peak potency, and wood from rowan trees grown in soil with high concentrations of magical residue. The enchantment process itself remains one of the most challenging in magical manufacturing, requiring precisely timed spellwork coordinated with astronomical conditions. The primary enchantment must be performed exactly at moonset on the night of the new moon, while secondary binding spells are added at precise intervals throughout the following lunar cycle. Even with modern magical aids, approximately 1 in 5 probes fails during manufacturing due to minute imperfections in material or timing, explaining their considerable cost and relatively limited availability. In practice, the Probity probe's operation requires both technical knowledge and intuitive sensitivity. Trained security personnel learn to distinguish between different patterns of vibration, which can indicate various types of deception or concealment. A gentle, rapid vibration typically suggests passive magical concealment, such as a disillusionment charm, while slower, more intense vibrations often indicate active deception or darker forms of concealment. The most skilled operators can even detect the subtle difference between nervousness and genuine intent to deceive. Though this level of discernment requires years of experience, Gringotts Bank represents the most visible deployment of Probity probes in Wizarding Britain. Visitors to the bank's higher security areas are routinely subjected to screening by goblin security specialists, wielding these golden instruments. The probes pass over a visitor's body at a distance of approximately 2 inches, paying particular attention to areas where concealed items are commonly carried: pockets, sleeves, and the small of the back. The procedure, while somewhat invasive by wizarding standards, is conducted efficiently and typically takes less than 30 seconds for a thorough examination. What many visitors fail to realize, however, is that the Gringotts security goblins are using the probes not merely to detect concealed objects, but to assess truthfulness of intent. When combined with specific questioning, CUR state your business, declare any magical items in your possession. The probe's sensitivity to deceptive responses provides an additional layer of security beyond mere physical detection. This dual functionality makes the probe particularly valuable in financial settings, where both physical and testimonial security are essential. The limitations of Probity probes have been subject to extensive study by both security experts and those seeking to circumvent them. The devices cannot generally detect objects whose concealment properties are inherent rather than applied through spellwork. Thus, a truly flawless invisibility cloak might pass undetected, though the extreme rarity of such items makes this vulnerability largely theoretical. Similarly, certain ancient artifacts with concealment properties embedded during their creation, rather than applied later, might escape detection by standard probes. More practical limitations concern the probe's range and specificity. The device functions optimally at distances under 3 inches, with sensitivity decreasing rapidly beyond that range. This necessitates the somewhat intrusive scanning procedure used in high-security environments, as distant scanning would miss all but the most powerful concealments. Additionally, in areas with high ambient magic, such as Hogwarts or the Department of Mysteries, background magical noise can interfere with readings, requiring specially calibrated probes for effective operation. The Ministry of Magic employs one of the most extensive networks of Probity probes in Wizarding Britain, with enhanced versions used throughout sensitive departments. Following the security breaches during both Wizarding Wars, when polyjuiced infiltrators and Imperiused officials compromised Ministry operations, advanced probes were developed with additional enchantments, specifically attuned to signs of identity concealment and mental influence. These specialized instruments are particularly valued in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and among minister-level security staff. During the period when Voldemort's supporters controlled the ministry, Probity probes were repurposed for more sinister applications. The devices, originally designed for defensive security, became tools of oppression used to detect concealed magical heritage documentation or prohibited materials related to resistance activities. This darker chapter in the instrument's history demonstrates how even seemingly neutral security technology can be weaponized when control of security infrastructure falls into malevolent hands. Beyond governmental and financial applications, Probity probes have found specialized uses in magical medicine and research. Mungo's Hospital, modified probes assist healers in detecting magically concealed injuries, wounds hidden by either the patient's own magic, sometimes occurring unconsciously in cases of magical trauma, or by curses designed to prevent treatment. In academic settings, researchers studying concealment enchantments use precisely calibrated probes to measure the effectiveness of experimental spells and to detect subtle interactions between different forms of magical hiding. The international variations in Probity probe design and usage reflect different magical traditions and security philosophies. Japanese magical security relies on significantly smaller probes crafted from bamboo rather than metal, incorporating kappa hair instead of demiguise strands. These instruments sacrifice some detection range for greatly enhanced sensitivity to water-based concealment magic, reflecting local magical concerns. American magical law enforcement, conversely, favors larger probes with Thunderbird tail feathers as their core component, creating devices particularly adept at detecting concealment enchantments cast with hostile intent. The relationship between Probity probes and privacy has generated ongoing ethical debates within the wizarding community. While few question their use in high-security environments like Gringotts or sensitive ministry departments, their deployment in more public spaces has proven controversial. The brief implementation of routine probe screening at the entrance to Diagon Alley following the Second Wizarding War prompted protests from civil liberties advocates concerned about unreasonable intrusion into the private magical practices of ordinary witches and wizards. This tension between security and privacy reached its peak during Minister Pius Thickness's administration, actually controlled by Voldemort, when enhanced probes were used during home inspections without proper authorization, ostensibly to detect contraband or concealed individuals. In reality, these searches targeted families suspected of harboring Muggle-borns or resistance members. This misuse significantly damaged public trust in security screening, leading to strict regulations on probe deployment. Following the war's conclusion, the training required to properly operate a Probity probe extends well beyond simple instructional guidance. Gringotts security goblins typically undergo a 6-month certification program before being entrusted with a probe, learning not only the technical aspects of the instrument, but also developing the psychological insights needed to interpret readings effectively. Ministry security personnel receive similarly extensive training, with additional focus on legal regulations governing security screening and appropriate response protocols for different types of detection events. For the average witch or wizard, encounters with Probity probes typically occur during visits to high-security areas of Gringotts or during certain ministry proceedings. The standard protocol involves a brief explanation of the screening process, followed by the actual scanning, which most describe as producing a slight warming sensation as the probe passes near the body, though this physical sensation comes from the operator's detection magic rather than the probe itself, which operates without direct contact. What many find most disconcerting about Probity probes is not their physical presence but their implication. The suggestion that deception can be objectively detected, that truth and falsehood leave distinct magical signatures that no amount of skill can perfectly disguise. This notion challenges the comfortable belief that our secrets remain truly our own, that what we choose to conceal stays hidden at our discretion, rather than merely escaping detection through technological limitations. Modern developments in Probity probe technology have focused on increasing specificity rather than overall sensitivity. The latest models can be calibrated to detect particular types of concealment or deception, making them more effective for specialized security applications, while reducing false positives. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement now employs probes programmed specifically for detecting the dark mark concealed by former Death Eaters, while Gringotts uses versions attuned to the magical signatures of counterfeit galleons and unauthorized duplication enchantments. The interplay between Probity probes and other security enchantments creates layered protection systems of remarkable sophistication. When combined with Thief's Downfall, as in Gringotts' high-security areas, caterwauling charms, and specialized wards, probes form part of integrated security frameworks that compensate for the limitations of individual detection methods. This system's approach to magical security represents one of the most advanced applications of practical defensive magic, with implications extending beyond physical security to the protection of information and magical resources. Looking toward the future, recent experimental work by the Department of Mysteries has explored the possibility of creating self-operating Probity probes that could maintain continuous surveillance without human operators. These autonomous instruments would theoretically be capable of monitoring large areas for suspicious magical concealment, alerting security personnel only when genuine detection events occur. The ethical and practical implications of such development remain under active debate within the magical security community. As morning advances and our exploration of this remarkable magical instrument draws to a close, consider this final question. In a world where devices exist that can detect our attempts at concealment, what truly constitutes privacy? Is it merely the absence of detection, or something more fundamental about our right to control which aspects of ourselves we choose to reveal, and which we maintain as solely our own? The answer may reveal more about our understanding of both security and freedom than any Probity probe could ever detect. Chapter 11. The Aftermath of the Second Wizarding War. The sun rises higher now, casting long shadows that gradually shorten, a fitting metaphor for the wizarding world's slow emergence from the darkness of Lord Voldemort's reign. In the quiet hours following the Battle of Hogwarts, as exhausted survivors gathered in the Great Hall among the fallen, few could fully comprehend the magnitude of what had just transpired, or envision the long path of healing and reconstruction that lay ahead. The immediate aftermath of Voldemort's defeat was characterized by a curious blend of euphoria and grief that swept through wizarding communities across Britain. In places like Diagon Alley, spontaneous celebrations erupted as news spread, reminiscent of the revelry that had followed his first defeat 16 years earlier. Yet these celebrations carried a more somber undertone, tempered by widespread awareness of the tremendous cost at which victory had been purchased. Unlike the first time, when most had remained ignorant of the sacrifice of Lily and James Potter, the names of the fallen at Hogwarts, Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Colin Creevey, and dozens more, were known and honored even as wizards and witches celebrated their newfound freedom. The task of rebuilding began with Hogwarts itself. The ancient castle, severely damaged during the final battle, required extensive magical restoration. Under the guidance of newly appointed headmistress Minerva McGonagall, teams of magical artisans, including specialists in architectural enchantments, worked throughout the summer of 1998 to repair the physical structure. The more complex magical elements, moving staircases, enchanted ceilings, and centuries-old protective wards, required particularly delicate reconstruction, with some of the most intricate work continuing well into the following academic year. Beyond the physical rebuilding, McGonagall faced the more challenging task of healing Hogwarts' spirit. The school had been not merely damaged but desecrated during the Carrow's tenure, transformed from a sanctuary of learning into a place of punishment and indoctrination. Her decision to delay reopening until September 1st, 1998, rather than attempting a rushed partial term, provided necessary time not only for physical repairs, but for the development of new approaches to house unity and emotional support for traumatized students. When Hogwarts reopened, several significant changes were immediately apparent. Inter-house common rooms were established to promote unity across traditional house divisions. The Defense Against the Dark Arts curriculum was completely redesigned with an emphasis on ethical magical defense rather than mere technical proficiency. Perhaps most poignantly, the castle incorporated subtle memorials, a Hall of Remembrance near the entrance hall, bearing the names of all who fell defending the school, and enchanted eternal flames that burned in sconces where particularly significant losses had occurred. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Magic underwent its own reconstruction, both physical and institutional. The atrium, which had been dominated by the grotesque Magic is Might statue during Voldemort's reign, was redesigned with a new monument honoring all victims of both wizarding wars. The oppressive Muggle-born Registration Commission offices were ceremonially destroyed, the space converted into an educational center focusing on wizarding diversity and Muggle relations. Kingsley Shacklebolt, appointed as interim minister for magic immediately following the battle, received formal confirmation from the Wizengamot in June 1998, after the most unanimous vote in ministry history. His administration faced the monumental task of rebuilding a government that had been not merely damaged but corrupted from within. Rather than quick superficial changes, Shacklebolt implemented fundamental reforms designed to prevent future subversion of magical governance. The Auror Office underwent particularly extensive reorganization under the leadership of newly promoted head Auror Gawain Robards, with significant input from Harry Potter, who would later join their ranks. New protocols were established for detecting Imperious Curse victims and identifying Polyjuice imposters. The previously fragmented approach to magical law enforcement, with overlapping jurisdictions between Aurors, Magical Law Enforcement Patrol, and various regulatory offices, was streamlined into a more coherent structure with clearer oversight and accountability. Perhaps the most profound institutional reform came in the complete restructuring of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The position of head of the department, previously vulnerable to political pressure, was reformed with new magical protections against undue influence. The laws regarding the use of Veritaserum and other truth detection methods in investigations were carefully balanced to protect civil liberties, while enabling effective pursuit of remaining Death Eaters and collaborators. The pursuit of justice for war crimes presented complex challenges that occupied the Wizengamot for years following Voldemort's defeat. The trials began with clear-cut cases, marked Death Eaters captured during the Battle of Hogwarts, most of whom received sentences in Azkaban, now guarded by human security rather than Dementors, another significant reform implemented by Shacklebolt. The more difficult cases involved those who claimed to have acted under the Imperious Curse or coercion, requiring careful investigation to distinguish genuine victims from willing collaborators. The Malfoy family's situation exemplified the nuanced approach to post-war justice. Lucius, despite his last-minute abandonment of Voldemort during the battle, faced prosecution for his extensive involvement in Death Eater activities. His cooperation in identifying other Death Eaters and hidden caches of dark artifacts resulted in a reduced sentence of 5 years under house arrest, with magical monitoring rather than imprisonment in Azkaban. Narcissa, whose lie to Voldemort had directly contributed to Harry Potter's survival, received no punishment beyond probationary monitoring. Most significantly, Draco, who had been coerced into service as a Death Eater, while still legally a child, was granted immunity in exchange for community service and participation in reconciliation programs. Beyond the high-profile cases, the ministry established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, modeled partly on Muggle post-conflict resolution approaches. This provided a forum for lesser offenders to acknowledge their actions, make amends, and reintegrate into wizarding society. For many witches and wizards who had cooperated with the regime out of fear rather than ideological commitment, this process offered a path to redemption without the severity of criminal prosecution. The economic reconstruction proved equally challenging. Diagon Alley, which had suffered both physical damage and severe economic depression during Voldemort's reign, gradually revitalized through a combination of private enterprise and ministry support. The Gringotts Recovery Fund, established with assets seized from convicted Death Eaters, provided low-interest loans to businesses rebuilding after the war. By the summer of 1999, most storefronts had reopened, though visitors noted that the atmosphere remained more subdued than in pre-war years, with security measures like identity verification and probity probe screening becoming standard practice at larger establishments. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes exemplified both the challenges and resilience of post-war recovery. After Fred Weasley's death at the Battle of Hogwarts, the shop initially remained closed, its vibrant facade darkened during the early months of mourning. George Weasley's decision to reopen, made with the encouragement of his family and with Ron Weasley joining as a partner, became a symbol of healing for Diagon Alley. The shop's reopening celebration in October 1998 drew hundreds of supporters, with all proceeds donated to the Hogwarts Rebuilding Fund. The social healing process extended well beyond institutional reforms. Throughout Wizarding Britain, communities developed their own remembrance traditions. The village of Hogsmeade established an annual candlelight vigil held on May 2nd, beginning at the Three Broomsticks and proceeding to the Hogwarts gates. In Godric's Hollow, the cottage where Lily and James Potter died, already a pilgrimage site since Voldemort's first defeat, became a focal point for new memorials honoring all who had fallen. Even in predominantly Muggle areas with small wizarding populations, subtle magical monuments appeared, enchanted gardens that bloomed perpetually, magically inscribed, stones visible only to magical visitors, statues that seemed ordinary to Muggle eyes, but revealed their true commemorative nature to those with magical perception. The psychological toll of the war required attention beyond physical rebuilding and institutional reform. St. Mungo's Hospital established a dedicated ward for magical trauma, addressing conditions that had previously received little focused treatment. Spell damage resulting from torture, the lasting effects of prolonged Dementor exposure, and psychological conditions similar to what Muggles call post-traumatic stress became recognized specialties within magical healing. The hospital also developed new approaches to treating survivors of the Cruciatus Curse, incorporating both magical remedies and techniques adapted from Muggle psychological healing. For Hogwarts students who had experienced the Carrows regime, specialized support programs provided much-needed healing. Former members of Dumbledore's army often struggled with the transition from resistance fighters back to students. Many found purpose in mentoring younger students who had been traumatized during the Carrows tenure. This organic peer support network eventually formalized into the Phoenix program, which paired older students who had fought in the battle with younger ones still processing their experiences. The international response to Britain's magical reconstruction demonstrated unprecedented cooperation across wizarding governments. The International Confederation of Wizards established the British Restoration Committee, through which foreign ministries contributed expertise and resources to rebuilding efforts. Magical delegations from France, America, Japan, and numerous other nations provided specialized assistance, ranging from curse-breaking for dark magic-damaged sites to advanced healing for complex magical injuries. This international solidarity arose partly from recognition that Voldemort's ideology had threatened magical communities worldwide, not merely Britain. Media coverage of the Reconstruction period revealed significant shifts in wizarding journalism. The Daily Prophet, compromised during Voldemort's control of the ministry, faced a crisis of credibility in the post-war period. Its attempts to present itself as having been under duress during its propaganda phase met with public skepticism. This created an opening for alternative publications like The Quibbler, which, despite its reputation for eccentricity, had maintained a courageously anti-Voldemort stance during the war. Under the continued editorship of Xenophilius Lovegood, who received a formal pardon for his brief cooperation with Death Eaters under duress, The Quibbler evolved into a more balanced publication, while maintaining its characteristic willingness to challenge official narratives. Educational reforms extended beyond Hogwarts to address systemic issues in wizarding education. The Wizarding Examinations Authority, Revised Wall and new T curricula to include more comprehensive education about Muggle society and magical Muggle relations. Special provisions were made for students whose education had been disrupted by the war, with flexible examination scheduling and individualized study programs. Hogwarts established an adult education division offering evening classes for those who had missed educational opportunities during Voldemort's reign, particularly Muggleborns who had been excluded from school entirely. The status of magical creatures and beings saw significant advancement during the Reconstruction period. Hermione Granger's work in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, before her transfer to magical law enforcement, led to fundamental reforms in house elf welfare, werewolf rights, and goblin relations. Building on the precedent of house elves, who had fought voluntarily in the Battle of Hogwarts, new regulations established minimum standards for their treatment while respecting cultural differences. The anti-werewolf legislation, which had severely restricted employment opportunities, was repealed and replaced with non-discrimination provisions, though social stigma remained a challenge despite these legal advances. Relations with the Goblin Nation improved gradually through careful diplomacy. The creation of the interspecies cultural exchange within the ministry provided a formal channel for addressing goblin grievances, particularly regarding the ownership of goblin-made artifacts. While full resolution of these long-standing disputes remained elusive, the establishment of regular diplomatic dialogue represented significant progress. The appointment of former Order of the Phoenix member Bill Weasley as liaison to the goblin community, given his experience at Gringotts, proved particularly beneficial in rebuilding trust. Magical transportation infrastructure required extensive reconstruction and security enhancement. The Flu network, which had been comprehensively monitored during Voldemort's regime, underwent a complete reconfiguration with new privacy protections and emergency protocols. The night bus service, suspended during the height of Death Eater control, resumed operations with enhanced security features, including identity verification charms and emergency portkey capabilities. Even the Hogwarts Express received significant magical upgrades, with additional protective enchantments and emergency response systems integrated discreetly into the historical train. Perhaps the most profound long-term change emerged in attitudes toward Muggle-born witches and wizards. The blatant persecution under Voldemort's regime had forced the wizarding community to confront lingering prejudices that had enabled such discrimination. Integration of Muggle studies into core magical education, increased representation of Muggle-borns in ministry leadership, and public recognition of Muggle-born contributions to the Resistance all contributed to a significant shift in cultural attitudes. While blood status prejudice did not disappear entirely, expressing such views became socially unacceptable in most wizarding contexts, a marked change from the pre-war tolerance of mild blood status bias. The personal aftermath for key figures in the war varied widely. Harry Potter's decision to join the Auror office, rather than return to complete his final year at Hogwarts, reflected his ongoing commitment to ensuring magical security, though friends noted his preference for field work over the public recognition that constantly followed him. Hermione Granger chose to complete her Hogwarts education before beginning her ministry career, where her methodical brilliance found expression in legal and social reforms. Ron Weasley divided his time between assisting George at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes and Auror training alongside Harry, bringing his strategic thinking to both endeavors. For the broader Weasley family, recovery from Fred's loss remained an ongoing process rather than a completed journey. The traditional Sunday dinners at the Burrow continued, with Fred's absence acknowledged rather than ignored, his chair remaining empty but present at the table. Molly Weasley channeled her grief into increased involvement with war orphans, eventually establishing the Fred Weasley Memorial Home for magical children who had lost parents in the conflict. Arthur Weasley's promotion to head a new division focused on Muggle-Wizard emergency coordination reflected the ministry's new emphasis on cooperative relations between magical and non-magical communities. Neville Longbottom's trajectory perhaps best symbolized the transformation wrought by the war. From an uncertain, frequently underestimated student to the resistance leader who destroyed the final Horcrux, his journey continued into a brief oral career before he found his true calling as professor of herbology at Hogwarts. There he became known for his special attention to struggling students, remembering his own early difficulties and recognizing potential that others might overlook. Luna Lovegood's post-war expeditions searching for magical creatures initially drew skepticism from the mainstream wizarding community. However, her discovery of several previously undocumented species gradually earned her grudging respect from magical zoologists. Her willingness to maintain friendships with house elves, centaurs, and other magical beings whom many wizards overlooked reflected the broader social changes occurring throughout wizarding society. As we approach the conclusion of our exploration into this pivotal period of wizarding history, one truth becomes apparent. The aftermath of the Second Wizarding War represented not merely recovery from damage inflicted, but a fundamental reimagining of what magical society could become. In the painful space created by conflict and loss, new possibilities emerged for addressing ancient prejudices, institutional failures, and cultural limitations that had persisted for centuries. As midday approaches and our time together draws toward its close, consider this question: what might we learn from the wizarding world's response to its darkest period, about the capacity for renewal after devastation, about the courage required not only to fight darkness, but to build something better in its wake, and about the delicate balance between remembering the past honestly while refusing to remain defined by its shadows. Chapter 12. The Genius of Filius Flitwick. As our day together reaches its zenith, the perfect time to celebrate one of the brightest magical minds of the modern era, a wizard whose diminutive stature belies his towering intellect, and whose gentle demeanor masks extraordinary magical power. Let us turn our attention to Filius Flitwick, Hogwarts' beloved charms master and head of Ravenclaw House, whose contributions to magical theory and practice have influenced generations of witches and wizards far beyond the walls of the castle. Born in October of 1958 to a goblin wizard mixed heritage family, young Filius navigated the complexities of dual magical traditions from his earliest years. His mother, Amara Flitwick, a talented witch specializing in enchanted object creation, and his father, Silverclaw, wizarding name Garrick Flitwick, a respected senior account manager at Gringotts, provided a home environment rich in both intellectual stimulation and cultural diversity. Growing up in a modest cottage in the Lake District, Filius demonstrated magical ability remarkably early, levitating his toy blocks into complex patterns before he could walk, and accidentally charming the family cat to change colors whenever it purred by age 3. His arrival at Hogwarts in September 1969 presented both challenges and opportunities. Standing barely 3 feet tall even then, Filius faced the predictable prejudices regarding his partial goblin ancestry. Yet from his first day, his extraordinary magical aptitude commanded respect from faculty and students alike. The Sorting Hat's decision to place him in Ravenclaw came after an unusually long deliberation, later revealed to have been a debate between Ravenclaw's intellect and Gryffindor's courage, qualities that would define Flitwick's entire career. Academic records indicate that Filius achieved the highest Charms OAD Waddle score recorded in the 20th century, followed by equally impressive Newt results. Professor Marcellus Mirrorwave, then Charms Master, noted in his teaching journal that young Flitwick possessed an intuitive grasp of magical energy flows that transcends mere technical proficiency, suggesting potential for theoretical contributions not seen since Rowena Ravenclaw herself. Beyond charm, C excelled in transfiguration and defense against the dark arts, though his potions work remained merely adequate, the one subject where his small stature created practical difficulties at standard height brewing stations. What distinguished Filius even among brilliant Ravenclaws was his practical application of magical theory. While many intellectually gifted students mastered textbook knowledge, Flitwick demonstrated an uncanny ability to extrapolate from established principles to create innovative spellwork. By his 6th year, He had developed several original charm variations, including a modified cheering charm that affected only the target's emotional state without the sometimes problematic euphoria that the standard version produced. This early creation hinted at the precision and control that would later distinguish his professional work. Upon graduating from Hogwarts in 1976 with top honors, Flitwick made the surprising decision to decline offers from both the Department of Mysteries and the prestigious Charms Research Institute of Zurich. Instead, he pursued competitive dueling, a choice that puzzled many who knew him only as a gentle, scholarly young wizard. What his classmates had not fully appreciated was the complex legacy of his dual heritage. In goblin culture, practical demonstration of skill carried significance beyond academic credentials. His father had been a champion blade duelist in goblin tournaments, and Filius sought to honor both sides of his heritage by excelling in the wizarding equivalent. His dueling career proved nothing short of spectacular. Between 1976 and 1984, Filius Flitwick claimed the European Dueling Championship 3 times and reached the finals of the Global Wizarding Dueling Competition on 4 occasions, winning twice. His distinctive style combined lightning-fast charm work with transfiguration techniques, often altering the dueling environment itself rather than attacking opponents directly. Competitors found themselves facing floors suddenly turned to ice, shields that reflected spells at unexpected angles, and occasionally their own wands temporarily transfigured into harmless objects at crucial moments. The duel that cemented his legendary status occurred in Madrid in 1983, facing the formidable Argentinian champion Alejandro Rosario. After nearly 30 minutes of increasingly complex spellwork that left spectators breathless, Flitwick executed what dueling historians still refer to as the Madrid maneuver, simultaneously casting a disillusionment charm on himself, conjuring 3 illusory duplicates, and performing a silent levitation charm that raised him 6 feet off the ground. Rosario's defensive spells targeted the illusions, while Flitwick, effectively invisible and not where any duelist would expect an opponent to be, calmly disarmed her with a perfectly placed Expelliarmus. The Spanish magical newspaper El Oráculo described it as dueling elevated to an art form, ballet performed with wand and wit. What few outside his close circle realized was that Flitwick's dueling career served another purpose beyond personal achievement or cultural bridging. The late 1970s coincided with the First Wizarding War, and Flitwick's travels for competitions provided cover for his work with an international network of resistance fighters opposing Voldemort's growing influence beyond Britain. While never formally joining the Order of the Phoenix, he maintained close communication with Albus Dumbledore, providing intelligence about Death Eater recruitment efforts in Eastern Europe and helping establish safe passage routes for Muggle-born wizards fleeing persecution. His transition to teaching came at Dumbledore's personal request, following the retirement of Professor Mirrorwave in 1984. Though initially hesitant to leave the excitement of competitive dueling, Flitwick had begun to recognize the broader impact he might have by shaping young minds. His acceptance of the Charms professorship at age 26 made him one of the youngest Hogwarts teachers in recent history, though his already distinguished reputation ensured respect from both colleagues and students despite his youth. Flitwick's teaching methodology revolutionized Charms education at Hogwarts. Rather than treating spells as isolated techniques to be memorized, he emphasized understanding the underlying principles of movement, intention, and magical energy flow. His famous 3 C's of charm work, concentration, conviction, and control, became a mantra not only in his classroom, but throughout magical education in Britain. Perhaps most significantly, he introduced practical problem-solving exercises where students needed to adapt known charms to novel situations, developing the magical equivalent of critical thinking skills. His classroom manner, gentle, encouraging yet maintaining impeccably high standards, created an environment where students felt safe to experiment while still being challenged to excel. First years often entered his class, intimidated by his dueling reputation, only to be disarmed metaphorically by his squeaky voice and kind encouragement. Yet by 7th year, Nebraska, students understood the steel beneath the softness. Flitwick accepted nothing less than a student's absolute best effort, though he showed remarkable patience in helping them discover what that best might be. Beyond teaching standard curriculum, Flitwick established several initiatives that enriched Hogwarts' educational offerings. The Charms Club, open to students from all houses, provided space for exploring magical techniques beyond the prescribed syllabus. The annual Charms Innovation Competition encouraged original spellwork from 6th and 7th years, with winners receiving apprenticeship opportunities with leading magical researchers. For struggling students, his foundational magic workshops addressed core principles often overlooked in standard instruction, helping those with difficulties to build stronger magical foundations. His appointment as head of Ravenclaw House in 1989 allowed Flitwick to further shape the educational environment at Hogwarts. While honoring Ravenclaw's traditional emphasis on intellectual achievement, he subtly shifted the house culture toward valuing creativity and practical application alongside academic knowledge. Under his guidance, Ravenclaw gradually shed its reputation for isolated intellectualism, with students increasingly engaging in cross-house collaborations and applying their theoretical expertise to real-world magical challenges. Flitwick's contributions to magical research continued throughout his teaching career, though now published in academic journals rather than demonstrated in dueling arenas. His seminal work Emotional Components in Charm Stability, published in 1992, challenged conventional understanding of spell persistence, demonstrating that the caster's emotional state during spellcasting affected not only immediate power, but long-term stability of the enchantment. This research proved particularly relevant for protective charms, leading to revised protocols for casting long-lasting wards and security enchantments. His series of articles on micro-precision in wand work, published in The Practical Charmer between 1994 and 1996, introduced the concept of fractional movements, wand gestures so subtle they appear almost imperceptible to observers, yet significantly impact spell characteristics. This work partially explained how Flitwick himself could cast complex charms with seemingly minimal movement, a technique previously attributed merely to exceptional talent, but now understood as a teachable, if advanced, skill. During Voldemort's return and the subsequent Second Wizarding War, Flitwick's previous combat experience proved invaluable to Hogwarts' defense. While maintaining his characteristic cheerful demeanor to reassure students, he quietly reinforced the castle's protective enchantments, incorporating obscure variations drawn from both wizarding and goblin magical traditions. His office became an informal planning center for staff members concerned about the growing darkness, with Flitwick providing both tactical insights and emotional support to his colleagues. His finest moment during this period came not on the battlefield but in the classroom, where he continued to teach not only charms but courage. When the Carrows attempted to implement their dark arts curriculum, Flitwick engaged in a campaign of subtle resistance, teaching defensive charms under the guise of theoretical exercises, ensuring students understood counterjinxes while appearing to comply with the new regime, and occasionally accidentally demonstrating protective spells that would prove useful against the very curses the Carrows advocated. During the Battle of Hogwarts, witnesses reported seeing a different Flitwick entirely. The dueling champion re-emerged as he led the defense of the castle's eastern approaches. Moving with astonishing speed despite his age and size, he single-handedly incapacitated 7 Death Eaters through a combination of perfect shield charms and precisely targeted offensive spells. Neville Longbottom later described watching Flitwick duel as like seeing magic itself come alive, not just spells being cast, but magic as this living, flowing thing that he could shape almost like conducting music. In the battle's aftermath, Flitwick's contributions to rebuilding Hogwarts extended beyond physical reconstruction. As one of the most senior surviving faculty members, he worked closely with Headmistress McGonagall to redesign curriculum addressing the emotional and psychological needs of traumatized students while maintaining academic rigor. His development of what he called restorative charms, spells specifically designed to help magical healing of both structures and spirits, earned him the Order of Merlin, 2nd class, in the honors following the war's conclusion. Flitwick's research in the post-war period increasingly focused on educational applications of charm theory. His comprehensive textbook, Principles of Progressive Charm Work, published in 2001, has become standard reading for advanced students throughout the wizarding world, notable for making complex magical concepts accessible without oversimplification. The text's organization, building from fundamental principles to advanced applications through carefully sequenced practical exercises, reflects his lifetime of teaching experience and deep understanding of how magical knowledge is best acquired and integrated. Beyond his academic contributions, Flitwick's advocacy for greater understanding between different magical communities deserves recognition. Drawing on his mixed heritage, he established exchange programs between Hogwarts and both the Goblin Magical Academy and the Centaur Stargazing Collective, creating unprecedented opportunities for cultural and magical knowledge sharing. These initiatives, while small in scale, represented significant steps toward a more inclusive approach to magical education that acknowledged the valuable traditions of non-human magical practitioners. Perhaps Flitwick's greatest legacy lies in the generations of students whose magical practice bears his influence. From aurors whose precision charm work reflects his careful training to healers applying his principles of emotional stability in medical spells, his former students consistently attribute their professional success to foundations laid in his classroom. Even those who pursue careers seemingly distant from charms often cite Professor Flitwick's methodical approach to magical problem-solving as formative in their professional development. His personal style became as much a part of Hogwarts tradition as the enchanted ceiling or moving staircases. Students across generations recall his characteristic chuckle when particularly pleased by a well-performed charm, his habit of standing on a stack of books to see over his desk, and his annual Christmas enchantments that transformed his classroom into magical winter wonderlands of increasing complexity each year. One particularly memorable year featured individualized snowflakes that hovered near each student, changing color to reflect their emotional state during spell practice, a whimsical demonstration of advanced charm theory disguised as festive decoration. For all his professional accomplishments, colleagues described Flitwick as remarkably humble, quick to celebrate students' achievements while minimizing mention of his own. His quarters in Ravenclaw Tower remained modestly appointed, except for his extensive personal library, which former students were always welcome to consult. Sunday afternoons often found him hosting informal tea gatherings, where discussions ranged from obscure magical theory to Muggle classical music, a particular passion of his, to the latest developments in wizarding chess strategy. As we conclude our exploration of this remarkable wizard's contributions, we find in Filius Flitwick a model of how intelligence, skill, and courage can be expressed not through grandiosity, but through consistent excellence and genuine care for others. In a wizarding world that often celebrates the flashiest magic or the most dramatic gestures, Flitwick's genius manifests in the perfect balance of precision and creativity, tradition and innovation, scholarship and practicality. As the day's light begins its gradual transition toward evening and our time together draws to a close, consider this final question. What might we learn from Professor Flitwick's example about the quieter forms of brilliance, those that express themselves not in momentary spectacle, but in the patient cultivation of knowledge and capacity in others? Perhaps there lies a magic more powerful than any single spell, in the art of helping others discover the unique gifts they themselves possess.